Making a criminal. Disc number 3, a reality flick series. Starring very important people. Very important. Big shots. Making a criminal. A reality flick series. Millions of taxpayer dollars. Disc number 3. Reality ahead.
Warning.
All roads eventually lead to reality, Boulevard. Detour in any direction, to the delusion all trolley.
Can't wait till you end up in prison.
What would one expect from an extremely high-level unconscionable, given allegations equals confessions, where many allegations are about evading service? Well, the service is not provided as a service. Or, although they will sign an affidavit saying you were sent a copy via first-class mail, nothing was ever sent. Then, they will say, you are ignoring it, then, obtain alternate service authority, buy more fraud upon the court. And, if you are sent something, there are papers missing. To all of that, you can add this.
Tossing the subpoena. Caught on tape. Starring Ms. Susan Selesky. April the 28th, 2013. We will watch it 3 times in a row. Pay attention to her passenger window. How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth?
Happy birthday, Maya. The balloons are to keep you smiling all day. The alienation game. How in the world? Using 9-year-old little girl's birthday as a scam and fraud tool. Working development research stage. Agreement. Pause to read. Minimum age of 18 required. Exposing evil.
Evil. Evil.
Happy birthday, Maya. However, what you will witness firsthand is a colluded conspiracy effort, resulting in intentional, psychological and emotional warfare, and all-around abusive assault on Maya on her birthday. Their primary goal? Use Maya's birthday as a vehicle to create and forward more fraud. Primarily, to continue to disparage her father. Then collectively forwarded this obvious scam, for years to come. Let's take a look, shall we? July 2nd, 2011, Mr. Stenkel drops off balloons for his daughter's 9th birthday, due to Miss Selesky rejecting Maya's desire to see her father on her birthday. Maya wanting her father turned into upset and anger with her mother. Rule number 1, keep away from daddy. Maya had been telling her mother she wanted her father with her on her birthday. Her mother, Miss Selesky, was not allowing that. Maya was very upset. The following email recants the details of the events by simply leaving balloons for his daughter. Saturday, July 2nd, 2011, at 4:57 p.m. Email from Mr. Stenkel to his own alleged attorney Robert Lazaro, Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen. Quick note, it begins saying yesterday, however that's a typo. It was 2 days earlier, on Thursday, June the 30th, 2011. The email notes the following. Yesterday, Maya was very upset, saying to me she wanted me at her birthday event, and it is her birthday and that is that. I told her I would love to come but she is with mom. I then told her that she can ask, but upsetting mom may not make a good birthday day for her, and it would not be a good idea. I don't care, it's my birthday. I repeated it. She went on and on, how she did not care. Later that evening, I had them call her to say hello, and unlike Maya, who hates talking on the phone to anyone, got on the phone and started with her mom. It wasn't a pleasant conversation. Basically refusing her to see me on her birthday, but in the middle of it, Susie had to go eat something. The next morning I asked Alex what the apartment number was, and he did not know, saying it was 3 something, but had around 5 digits. When I dropped them off, he went over to Susie and asked her what it was, and she refused to tell him. Huh? So much for sending her something on her birthday. I knew where the complex was, so I figured at the least, I would get her some balloons and tie them to the van, so in the morning when they go out, Maya would see them. Not wanting to go too early as they may be stolen or something, I went very late so most people would not be out. It was after 1 a.m. when I got there, and what awaited me was another surprise. I knew there was a gate, and not being a tenant, they would not let me drive into the place, so I parked outside of it and walked up to the security guy, and asked if it would be okay if I tied these balloons on the van for my daughter. I also told him I had no idea what lot it was in, so if he could just give me the lot, that would be great, I could find the van. He said.
Okay.
Then said.
Hold on 1 second.
And was fumbling through papers and said he
could not let me in.
Really? I just want to tie the balloons to the van door. Note, Miss Siliski had rejected many requests from Maya regarding her birthday wish to see her father, which Mr. Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen were well aware of. Also, on page number 3 of this email, I attached the photos of the balloons. This rejection, causing Maya's upset, is noted on June 30th, 2011, by Miss Siliski herself, in her own notes. Note, this confirms just 2 days before her birthday, Miss Siliski rejected Maya's request. Furthermore, it confirms Mr. Stengel's email, recanting the events of the day, sent to the so-called experts. This is an email written by Miss Siliski on July 3rd, 2011, at 7:56 a.m., to the R Strikers. Received from the R Strikers, through a subpoena Mr. Stengel sent out. The email from Miss Siliski contains her notes of events.
6:30. Spoke to Alex and Maya for a few minutes. Maya was very upset about her birthday. Alex was upset about the bar mitzvah. I changed the subject and said we'd wait and see.
Note, we will address the bar mitzvah issue later. You can be sure, it's another scam. July 2nd, 2011, Maya's birthday, reality. Mr. Stengel brings balloons to their apartment complex late, so nobody takes them. Unable to tie them to the van door, as Miss Siliski left details and photos, even regarding Scott, his older son. Do not let these dangerous people in. Complete with descriptions of vehicles. Mr. Stengel asked the guard if he could tie them to the exit gate, so his daughter would get them in the morning when they left. The guard said, no problem. Did everything go smooth? Almost. The father had pictured it going smoother. Take balloons, tie them up, turn around, bye. Pretty simple, right? Email dated July 2nd, 2011, at 4:57 p.m., the same day the daughter's birthday, and Mr. Berg's client, from the father to Leon Berg, best interest attorney, Dr. Catherine Killeen, child custody evaluator, and the father's attorney Bob Lazaro, stating the events surrounding what one would think would have been a simple task: leave balloons for his daughter so she can enjoy them when she leaves in the morning. What the father did not know was, as part of the mother's manufacturing witnesses program, the mother previously put the security guardhouse at the entrance, and the entire apartment complex, on high alert security status. Danger, danger. Fact and reality. Mr. Stengel tied them, took a picture and left. Even though Miss Siliski was not bothered, and stated she was not aware until the morning when leaving, she saw Mr. Stengel was there at 1:32 a.m. That's all she needed to know, and off to the races, with Bradford G. Carney, Leon W. Berg, Dr. Catherine Killeen and the rest of the crime ring. However, the stage was apparently preset. What remains to be seen is, 1. Who falsely set it? 2. Who knowingly forwarded it? 3. Who will play along with the mother's con scheme? 4. And for how long? 5. Who will speak up for Maya? What will they morph this into? The first event after the father brought balloons to his daughter. Legal bill dated August 16th, 2011, from the mother's attorney Bradford G. Carney. Line item July 5th, 2011, where it states,
Susie's email regarding Mark's gatehouse denial.
Note: denial. Huh? The reality is, it was a denial, due to the mother's psychotic and false information provided to the apartment complex about the children's father and their older brother. Although billed with other things, such as
Read email from Susie and Mark's latest BG&E bill.
Note: this on July the 5th, 2011, 7 months after Miss Silisky left the home, and the bill always only in Mr. Stengel's name. Miss Silisky either hacked into Mr. Stengel's Baltimore gas and electric account online, or removed the bill from his mailbox. Notes: 0.40 hours or $150. While we are on the ongoing topic of fraud, this related to Mr. Stengel's BGE account. 6 months later, on January the 25th, 2012, Bradford G.Y. Carney's bill notes.
Read email from Susie and Mark's BG&E bill due December 22, 2011, $429.32.
Now, over a year after Miss Silisky left the home, notes the exact amount. Further confirming the online hacking of Mr. Stengel's account, or stealing the bill from Mr. Stengel's federally protected mailbox. Mr. Carney is not only aware of these serious crimes, and fails to report it to authorities, rather bills for 0.10 hours, for $37.50, which he demands Mr. Stengel pay his fraud bills. Even the ones that contain crimes. Let's continue with the daughter's birthday balloon scam. It should be noted, Miss Silisky's inability to tell her daughter, "Hey, your father brought you balloons." Instead, continues her ongoing con, even involving the apartment complex. Besides, the buzzword, denial, already says so much, doesn't it? We will pay attention to how that buzzword is also used. It fits well with, danger, danger, danger. This from that same email written by Miss Silisky on July the 3rd, 2011, at 7:56 a.m., to the R Strikers. Received from the R Strikers, through a subpoena Mr. Stengel sent out. The email from Miss Silisky contains her notes of events.
7-2, Mark came to apartment complex at 1:30 a.m., to deliver balloons for Maya's birthday. Kids spoke to Mark at 10:15 a.m. Mark called at 8:32 p.m. and 9:18 p.m. My cell was in bedroom charging with door shut, kitten. Nana was here. Maya was in bed. Alex was getting ready for bed. I didn't see that call came in until almost 9:45 and told Alex to call his dad. In front of Nana he said, "Nia. Spoke to him today already." Mark called 11:30 p.m.
The second event is contained in this fraudulent legal bill dated August the 16th, 2011, from the mother's attorney Bradford G.Y. Carney, where it states,
July 6, 2011, BGC, 0.40 hours, draft letter to Leonberg and B. Lazaro regarding Mark's 1:25 a.m. attempt to gain entry to Elkridge Estates.
Note: 1. Besides Mr. Lazaro and Mr. Berg already received the detailed letter from Mr. Stengel, 4 days earlier. 2. Mr. Carney fraud bills for 0.40 hours, and another, $150. 3. More buzzwords, by the king of fraud and buzzwords. Attempt. 2. Gain entry. 4. Sounds like a failed break-in. To me. 5. Last, but never least. Danger, danger. The third fraud event is during Miss Silisky's second fraudulent protective order filing on November the 15th, 2011. Provided to Judge Sally Chester, and noted as Letter O, states,
He tried to enter my gated apartment complex at 1:32 a.m., uninvited and bringing balloons to my 9-year-old.
Note: 1. Sounds like she adopted Mr. Carney's approach. He tried to enter. 2. And the infamous buzzword, uninvited. 3. Similar buzzword, unannounced, was fraudulently used by Alison Meister Friedman as well, during her 15 pages of defaming and perjurious sworn testimony. The fourth fraud event is sworn testimony on November the 23rd, 2011, in front of Judge Leo Ryan Jr., the trial for Miss Silisky's second fraudulent protective order filing. This trial known as the Altered Evidence Trial. The transcript notes.
Well, if he had come earlier, would you have let him in to give balloons?
Sure, had he called and asked to deliver balloons, I even tried to arrange a time for him to have lunch with her.
Note: 1. Huh? 2. Really? 3. She tried to arrange lunch. Then why does her own notes reflect Maya being upset? 4. Bullshit. Therefore, perjury. As if an invitation would be sent to the father to tie balloons outside. Like everything else the Fab Four and more, crime ring does, scheme, scam and slime, all over everyone. It should be noted, the crime ring members also instructed Alison Meister Friedman, aka manufactured witness/perjurer, to swear the father came over to her home unannounced during Halloween as well. They failed to tell her the mother actually invited the father in an email just 2 hours before, which the father had. Therefore, Miss Silisky, setting up yet another staged event, that time using the children's Halloween as the background, and the Friedman family as tools.
Yeah, I've been around him before, the Halloween before. His son Alex and my son are very close friends, and they had come. Alex had come trick-or-treating at my house the Halloween before, and Alex was with his mother that night, and Mark came to our house unannounced, even though it was Susie's night.
Email from Miss Silisky Stengel, Sunday, October the 31st, 2010, at 3:09 p.m., to Mr. Stengel. Subject, Halloween.
Would you like to meet at 5 p.m. at Meister's to trick or treat?
Note 1. This, the day after Miss Silisky, with the assistance of Betsy and David R. Stryker, in uprooting the children on their father's birthday. 2. How programmed and deluded was Alison Meister Friedman, with her statement.
Even though it was Susie's night.
The his and hers nights did not begin until almost 2 months later, on December the 22nd, 2010. All 15 pages are full of false, defamatory and perjurious testimony. Then Alison Meister Friedman assisted the psychopath in conning a women's abuse organization, Hana, in abusing a women's abuse organization. Alison Meister Friedman also involved in the Boys Latin School Fall Fist staged event, where her sworn testimony conflicted with Miss Silisky's. Alison Meister Friedman, 1. Are you evil? 2. Assisting evil? Or 3. Conned by evil? Furthermore, is $1 million enough motive for murder? Do you have any information regarding the untimely demise of Bobby Silisky, just weeks after he filed a complaint regarding his sister's shady handling of their father's estate, where Bobby, or even the grandchildren, did not receive so much as a pencil from their grandfather? However, what Alison Meister Friedman is actually witnessing is stated by Miss Silisky herself, where in that very email she states,
Maya has been asking to come home.
Therefore, Miss Silisky not only conned Betsy and David R. Stryker the day before, but is now conning, abusing, and involving the Friedmans in her psychotic staged Halloween event. It's clear, Maya, 8 years old, is being held against her will by her mother, and her liberties being restrained. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? The fifth fraud event is sworn testimony on April the 12th, 2012, in front of Judge Timothy Martin, at the appeal of the second fraudulent/altered evidence trial.
Since you moved there, has your husband ever attempted to come to your residence?
Yes, he has.
When was that?
It was late. It was 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning on the night of my daughter's 9th birthday, July 2nd. In the middle of the night, he tried to come through the gatehouse.
What year was that? Last year?
2011.
Okay.
Yeah. And the gatehouse tried calling me. I was asleep. And then they asked him to leave.
So he was not allowed to come on the premises?
No.
Have you since learned why he was there?
Well, it's his testimony that he was bringing balloons to my daughter for her birthday at 1:30 in the morning.
This from that same email written by Miss Silisky on July the 3rd, 2011, at 7:56 a.m., to the R. Strikers. Received from the R. Strikers, through a subpoena Mr. Stengel sent out. The email from Miss Silisky contains her July 2nd, 2011, notes of events.
7-2. Mark came to apartment complex at 1:30 a.m. to deliver balloons for Maya's birthday.
Note 1. Who doesn't love documentation? 2. Miss Silisky's own notes, makes no mention of danger, or fear of any kind. 3. That's perjury for Miss Silisky, and subornation of perjury for Mr. Bradford G. Carney, who has made an entire career out of having people lie under oath. 4. Apparently, this is also part of the corrupt Judith Enser's statement regarding Mr. Stengel's irrelevant subpoenas. Not so irrelevant.
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
There are plenty of puzzle pieces, so here is another. Also enlightening, Miss Silisky is crystal clear in her email as to Mr. Stengel bringing balloons. Yet 9 months later, under oath swears her knowledge is now based on.
Have you since learned why he was there?
Well, it's his testimony.
from crystal clear too.
It's his testimony.
During cross-examination, the following was sworn to on page number 88, during the April 12, 2012 appeal.
And he was going to surprise her with those?
Where was he attaching them on my vehicle?
You weren't aware of that?
No. I mean, I was aware that he brought balloons.
Okay, just answer.
They were there.
Did you see the balloons?
The next morning, yeah.
Did you leave them at the gatehouse?
Yes.
Note, Kapow. 1. I was aware that he brought balloons. That's not what she said on page number 8, where it was Mr. Stengel's testimony. 2. Mr. Carney's attempt just to answer the question was too late. 3. She saw the balloons the next morning. Therefore, she had no idea whether they were brought at 10 p.m. or 8 a.m. 4. This confirms the notes of the time was used as the opportunity for fraud, not whether anyone was bothered. 5. She is aware Mr. Stengel left them at the gatehouse. Remember that, for now. Still April the 12th, 2012, Mr. Carney cross-examines Mr. Stengel on pages 167 to 169. For Mr. Carney, since there is always so much bullshit, we'll have the notes at the end, so not to interrupt the fraud flow.
The incident where you tried to gain access to Elkridge Estates at 1:32 a.m. in the morning with 9 balloons for your daughter. Why at 1:32 in the morning? Why not at 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
First of all, there were 2 balloons, not 9.
Oh, pardon me, I'm sorry.
2 balloons, yeah. And second of all, I already testified as to why not at 5 or 6 o'clock.
I see. You wanted to surprise her?
No, because I felt I wanted to surprise her the next day when she went out. But I felt if I went over at like 5, 6, 7 o'clock and tied the balloons on, then somebody would take them. They're balloons, and it's an apartment complex. I figured some kid may grab them. I don't know. My objective was for my daughter to get the balloons when she went out in the morning. That was my objective. So I figured if I went earlier, they may disappear, they may not. I don't know. But if I went late, I figured it would have a better chance of her getting balloons when she went out in the morning.
Do you think that's appropriate behavior to go to your estranged wife's apartment at 1:32 a.m. in the morning for any reason?
I don't really know what estranged means. Quite frankly, I don't understand.
You're separated, you're not together.
You don't understand. Okay. Well, I wasn't thinking. I was thinking of my daughter. I wasn't thinking of anything else other than my daughter coming out in the morning on her birthday getting balloons. That's all I was thinking of.
And you said in your testimony that you knew that your wife was going to keep you from seeing your daughter that day on her birthday, so that's why you went over there.
That's correct.
It's true, is it not, that she sent you an email that day inviting you to take Maya out to lunch on her birthday?
What?
Isn't
Not
that
even
true,
a chance.
sir?
No, you have the
Or a
email?
couple days before
No.
her birthday?
That never happened.
I see. Now,
I'd like to see the email.
there was some testimony.
Note, 1. Gain access buzzword. 2. 9 balloons, 157 balloons. It's all the same to psychosis. 3. Has Mr. Carney ever gotten a contradicting answer from Mr. Stengel in all the years of his fraud? 4. Estranged. Mr. Stengel knows what documenting fraud and documenting corrupt judges means. 5. The email invite. That day. A couple days before. Pick a number. 6. Again, more perjury, followed up by Mr. Carney suborning it, as he is well aware that doesn't exist. 7. Asking for evidence of their over 2,000 counts of perjury, and suborning perjury. Why? The corrupt judges never require it. That email request was ignored by Mr. Carney. That email exists, just like a conscience exists, with Mr. Carney, or within the many noted extremely high-level unconscionables, and Mr. Stengel's research subjects. The 8th fraud event is on October the 25th, 2012, in front of Judge Mickey Norman, to extend the already bogus protective order, but not until Mr. Stengel files to have it rescinded. Mr. Stengel's rescind order got lost in the lower underbelly of the building, and Miss Sileski's extension appeared to float to the top. Like all the fraud.
Has Mr. Stengel, and that's a gated community, you've got to go through a security guard and get in the gate in order to get in the premises, right?
Yes,
Has Mr. Stengel attempted to come on the premises?
he did.
What time of the day or night did he try to come onto the premises?
After 1 a.m.
And so when you say premises, do you mean the Elkridge Estates
The Elbridge Estates gate.
Gate,
To
okay.
get through the gate.
All right.
What time of the evening was that?
It was 1 or 1:30 a.m.
Okay. And was he stopped
Yes.
by the security people? And how were you made aware of this?
They called me the next morning.
Okay. And did he have anything with him at the time?
He had balloons for, apparently, my daughter for her birthday.
Note 1. Balloons, apparently. Were the balloons for someone else? 2. Stopped by security. Tell the tooth fairy we said hello. Mr. Stengel walked up to the security guy to ask him. 3. She previously testified the gatehouse called her that night, but she was sleeping. 4. Now Miss Sileski swears under oath, as Mr. Carney suborns the fraud, they called her in the morning. Spin the fraud wheel. 5. Reality sucks. 6. Is it obvious? 7. They form a play, and they run with it. 8. Rinse and repeat. 9. Install theory, suspicious, danger danger. 10. Talk about, running with the bulls, shit. Missing person alert. Where is Mr. Berg? Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg. On pages 68 to 69, Miss Sileski now plays dumb. Nothing ever matches. Watch and listen.
Let's talk about the balloons at your apartment. Okay. I brought the balloons at 1:30 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
On July 2nd, correct?
Yes.
And I couldn't get into the complex, correct?
Yes.
Because you told the gate guy that I was some kind of crazy person.
Objection.
No.
Overruled. What did you say?
I told him that I'm in the middle of a separation, and I don't want my husband coming through.
And you also left him with a photo of my older son from my first marriage, correct? And his car.
Both of you, yes.
Right. And so he wouldn't let me in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But he did allow me to tie the balloons to the gate outside, correct?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I wasn't there.
Okay. So July 2nd. What's synonymous with that date?
Objection.
I'm going to guess it's your daughter's birthday. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
So when she woke up in the morning and you drove out of the complex, were there balloons tied to the gate?
Yes.
Okay. So there were balloons tied to the gate.
But I don't know who tied them there.
Okay. So if I told you that I did, would that be?
Wasn't there.
However, 6 months earlier, on April the 12th, 2012, when asked,
He was going to surprise her with those?
Where was he attaching them on my vehicle?
You weren't aware of that?
No. I mean, I was aware that he brought balloons.
Just answer.
They were there.
Did you see the balloons?
The next morning, yeah.
Did you leave them at the gatehouse?
Yes.
note, how many versions are there? Many. Which of her versions, and Mr. Carney's suborning all these versions, is the correct one? None of them. The truth has one version. They clearly don't ever stumble onto 2 + 2 = 4. The same holds true for their entire crime ring. Yet Mr. Stengel, throughout all his testimony, has one version, regardless of what the subject is. And Mr. Stengel's version just so happens to have hard evidence backing it up. Go figure. What is Judge Judith Enser's take on this? On September the 18th, 2013, on pages 192 to 193, she states,
Invoice number 45582, dated August 16th of 2011, contains an entry regarding Mr. Stengel's 1:25 a.m. attempt to gain entry to Elbridge Estates, Ms. Stengel's home. This should not occur. There should not be any attempt to enter at 1:25 a.m. Therefore, there should not be any need to call your lawyer. There should not be any need for your lawyer to spend any time on it.
Note, apparently, over the previous 7 months, and after, going line by line with Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney's bills, this judgeess is reading Mr. Carney's entry descriptions as not only fact, but reality, and even further, evidence. However, we already know, that's Mr. Carney's added fraud, and not what Miss Sileski's own notes say.
7-2, Mark came to apartment complex at 1:30 a.m. to deliver balloons for Maya's birthday.
The corrupt judgeess, Judith Enser, is more than aware of Mr. Carney's psychosis, as they share the same personality disorder. Furthermore, she is aware she is knowingly dealing with a well-known alcoholic, who 7 months earlier, on November the 29th, 2012, was herself present to Mr. Bradford G. Y. Carney's statement of drug abuse, which just so happens to match Dr. Catherine Killeen's knowingly false and fraudulent sworn testimony regarding Mr. Stengel.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm loaded up on Valium and Oxycontin. It's really good stuff. It's great. Doesn't work. That's what I'm taking.
How obvious is this crime ring's conspiracy and fraud? How many attorneys have come before Judgetis Judith Enza, or any judge, where they allow their clients' bills to almost reach $200,000? Add to that, in a case where neither Mr. Carney or his client Miss Silisky is contesting Mr. Stengel's prenuptial agreement, where Miss Silisky gets nothing? Dear line-by-line lady, we await your answer. While pondering that, it should be noted, Miss Silisky was never above water in her bills, for even one day. While pondering that, ponder that including Mr. Carney's $7,500 retainer being ignored. This fact is obvious in the first month of Mr. Carney's bills. Add to that fact, Mr. Carney and his client filing zero income statements. Their fraud scam is more than obvious from the very start. How then were any of these criminals planning on being paid? Who was going to pay them? Answer, Mr. Stengel's children, with the destruction and raping of their childhoods. The very next day, on November the 30th, 2012, on page number 115, comes Mr. Carney's fraud confession, which is really a confession for their entire crime ring.
Because as Mr. Fetter said, to ferret out the lie, you got to do more work. And the more work I did, the more frustrating it became because I just kept coming up empty.
Note, this psychotic evil Judge Thiss, a full member of the crime ring, in a 100% completely illegal act, refused Mr. Stengel even question Mr. Carney regarding his bills, which they all demand he must pay. Guilty.
I have a question for Your Honor, if you don't mind. In relation to Mr. Carney's bills, am I able to ask him questions in regards to his bills?
No.
No?
I went through the bills. I went through them line by line. I studied the descriptions of the work performed, and I considered the rates charged. Part of that review, frankly, was with an eye to determining who was actually driving the litigation. And of course, for that, I only have the pleadings filed and the descriptions delineated in the bills themselves. I do find the hourly rates charged to be fair. I find the time allotted for the tasks performed reasonable. I find that of the almost $200,000 in legal bills, much is attributable to inappropriate actions on the part of Mr. Stengel.
Note, apparently this corrupt Judgetis Judith Enza's line-by-line statement included the insane amount of collusion and conspiracy against Mr. Stengel and his children, as well as the numerous confessions of criminal actions by Miss Silisky, both well documented in Mr. Carney's own bills. Besides, numerous collusion and conspiracy actions noted in Mr. Leon W. Berg's own bills, against his minor client's best interest. Where is Mr. Leon W. Berg hiding in all of this? Mr. Leon W. Berg. To better understand Mr. Leon W. Berg's fraud role in all of this, we only need to look at what Mr. Berg himself agreed to. 1. The December 22, 2010 consent order, assigning Mr. Berg as best interest attorney. 2. Mr. Berg's own contract on January 7, 2011. 3. The Maryland rules noted in his own contract. 4. Mr. Berg's actions, or lack of actions. 5. Mr. Berg's many confessions.
Consent order. Dated December 22, 2010. Number 4. Ordered that Leon W. Berg, Esquire, 28 Allegheny Avenue, Suite number 500. Towson, Maryland 21204, phone number 41049477770, is appointed as the best interests attorney for the minor children, in accordance with the Maryland Guidelines of Practice for court-appointed lawyers, representing children in cases involving child custody or child access. All costs shall be advanced by the plaintiff, subject to reapportionment by the court.
Mr. Leon W. Berg's own executed contract, dated January 6, 2011, on page number 1 states,
ordered, that Leon W. Berg, Esquire, is appointed as best interest attorney, in accordance with the Maryland Guidelines of Practice for court-appointed lawyers, representing children in cases involving child custody or child access.
Maryland Guidelines for practice for court-appointed lawyers representing children in cases involving child custody or child access. 1. Definitions. 1.1 Child's Best Interest Attorney. Child's Best Interest Attorney means a lawyer appointed by a court for the purpose of protecting a child's best interests without being bound by the child's directives or objectives. This term replaces the term guardian ad litem. The child's best interest attorney makes an independent assessment of what is in the child's best interest and advocates for that before the court, even if it requires the disclosure of confidential information. The best interest attorney should ensure that the child's position is made a part of the record, whether or not different from the position that the attorney advocates.
Important notes: A. Independent assessment. B. Should ensure that the child's position is made a part of the record. C. Whether or not different from the position that the attorney advocates.
2. Responsibilities. 2.2 Child's Best Interest Attorney. A child's best interest attorney advances a position that the attorney believes is in the child's best interest. Even if the attorney advocates a position different from the child's wishes, the attorney should ensure that the child's position is made a part of the record.
Important notes: A. Advances a position that the attorney believes is in the child's best interest. B. The attorney should ensure that the child's position is made a part of the record. What did these so-called experts, Mr. Leon W. Berg in particular, demanding payment in excess of $62,000 for doing what's in the best interest of the children do?
Today is July 15th, 2011. And I found out good and bad news. There's a court thing for custody on August 27th, 2011, which is in about a month and a half, I'd say, give or take a couple days. Mom has been calling Dad, like he's been manipulating us. She's been calling calling Dad bad names. And right now, Maya is like lost. That's how I put it. She's like, whatever Mom says she follows because she's Mommy's little girl. But she never cared about Dad. Because Dad tells her what's right and what's wrong. And Mom tells her what's wrong and what's wrong. I mean, Mom gave her 2 bags of cotton candy at her party at Six Flags, because Mom was afraid that our original plan was to go to Hershey Park for Maya's birthday, but we went to Six Flags. I know why. Mom knew a different reason why, but it was a reason to agree on, because it was the truth, but it wasn't the complete truth. She just didn't want Dad to know where we were in case he showed up. So she went to a place where Dad wouldn't know. And she only let us call him at the end where we were about to leave, because just in case he wanted to come while we were already there and meet us somewhere. So, I'm really looking forward to the August 2nd thing, 27th for custody. It's good yet bad because it's the beginning of the school year. And good because I'm pretty sure Dad's going to get it. And that's pretty much all I have to say for this one. Alright.
Well, if he had come earlier, would you have let him in to give balloons?
Sure, had he called and asked to deliver balloons. I even tried to arrange a time for him to have lunch with her.
Reality. Alex documenting his reality regarding his mother, such as his mother disparaging his father to him, and his wishes, clearly stating his father getting custody, was, as he stated,
Today is July 15th, 2011, and I found out good and bad news.
And, towards the end, Alex clearly documented his wishes, and, specifically for what? As he states,
I'm really looking forward to the August 2nd thing, 27th for custody. It's good yet bad because it's the beginning of the school year. And good because I'm pretty sure Dad's going to get it.
provided to them all. if we put that evidence, of their own foreknowledge, of their own frauds and abuses, aside, we have Alex noting, 1. Their plans were to go to Hershey Park, in Pennsylvania. 2. An all-day event. Therefore, how would Mr. Stengel have lunch with his daughter, as sworn to, by Miss Silisky? 3. Making it not possible. 4. In fact, Miss Silisky went so far as to change venues. 5. Therefore, in a classic allegations equals confessions, and extremes tactics, Miss Silisky not only did not send any email as she swore, but went out of her way to not allow that. Even interrupting Maya's birthday. Add to that, trapped in her van for hours, her birthday contained being forced to listen to her mother, talk to her attorneys, regarding their scheming and scamming plans, including further disparaging her father. Mr. Stengel files to have Mr. Leon W. Berg removed as best interest attorney. Mr. Berg refused to leave the case, even though he was allegedly owed about $40,000 and not being paid. His refusal was simply due to alienating the case, so no other best interest attorney, or anyone else could look into his and the actions of his crime ring members, which included Judge Judith Enzer. On September 18, 2013, in regards to Mr. Stengel's filing, Judge Enzer reprimands Mr. Stengel's attorney for the filing, as it stated facts and truths, telling Mr. Rudo.
I think in about 10 years, if you see that motion, you're going to cringe that you signed your name to it.
A circuit court judge, reprimanding an attorney, out of law school for about 1 year or so, for putting his client first. Therefore, demanding he get in line with their criminal actions. To the point where he will cringe for not following their frauds. And, just prior to that abusive statement, Judge Judith Enzer, also on page number 201, with the children's mother, father, brother, aunts, uncles and cousins, in the courtroom, in regards to Mr. Berg stated,
I think you should think long and hard before you say a gentleman who has probably shown more concern for these children than anyone else in this room.
Keys to the birthday castle. What's most interesting, besides their collective actions, is regardless of what type of communication, whether text message, email, letters, motions, transcript, filings, whatever, and this topic was kept in many, and by Miss Silisky, Leon W. Berg, Dr. Catherine Killeen, Judge Judith Enzer or Bradford G. Y. Carney, not one of them ever made any mention whatsoever regarding Maya. Not one of them. Not one time. Ever. It should be noted, Mr. Stengel did the same exact thing in 2013, yet there were no entries or fuss created. They had already milked that scam. Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg. Has anyone heard from Mr. Berg? Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg, a couple weeks earlier you were advised by Mr. Stengel, Miss Silisky would not arrange for the children, your clients, to see their father on Father's Day. You refused to respond to Mr. Stengel, let alone get involved. Does spending Father's Day with their father not qualify as in your client's best interest? Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg. You were also provided details after the fact. Can you show where your notes representing the children's interest are? We only have the paragraph. Are we missing something? Mr. Berg. Mr. Leon W. Berg. Mr. Berg, on July 3, 2011, the day after Maya's birthday, was a bar mitzvah in New Jersey. Even though Miss Silisky told the bar mitzvah boy's mother, Alex and Maya would attend, that didn't happen. In fact, there are emails and letters asking for your assistance. You not only refused to get involved, but refused to respond. Why, Mr. Berg? Your clients were obviously upset about it, as noted in Miss Silisky's own notes. Let's take a look, shall we? This from that same email written by Miss Silisky on July 3, 2011, at 7:56 a.m., to the R Strikers. Received from the R Strikers, through a subpoena Mr. Stengel sent out. The email from Miss Silisky contains her multiple notes of events regarding the bar mitzvah. First, we look at the June 30, 2011, entry, where she writes,
Alex was upset about the bar mitzvah. I changed the subject and said we'd wait and see. Never heard from Mark's attorney about the bar mitzvah. Brad decided we should just wait to hear from Lazaro. Never did. Valerie Lehman called to ask about bar mitzvah.
Note 1. That's false. In fact, Mr. Lazaro was waiting to hear back from Miss Silisky and the corrupt Bradford G. Carney. 2. She even notes the bar mitzvah of the boy's mother, Valerie Lehman, called to ask about bar mitzvah. 3. That was 4 days before July the 3rd, the bar mitzvah day. 4. In fact,
I changed the subject and said we'd wait and see.
Is a confession she was not allowing it, period. 5. Right, Mr. Berg. Then, on July the 3rd, 2011,
7:03, Mark called 6:26 a.m. Phone was on vibrate. I looked at phone and went back to sleep. Mark called again at 7:22 a.m. This time I woke up. I called the gatehouse to see if he had come by. He hasn't. The kids are still asleep. It's 7:36 a.m. Scott called my cell at 7:44 a.m. Gee, thought he told his dad that I shouldn't contact him anymore. 7:54 a.m. Scott left voicemail for Alex and Maya to call him. I texted him and said I'd have them call as soon as they wake up.
Note 1. Obviously, the children's upset was and is of no concern to Miss Silisky or Mr. Berg. 2. Mr. Stengel and his older son kept calling, as Miss Silisky said they could go, but that was just part of her psychotic games. 3. Confession. Phone on vibrate. 4.
Mark called again at 7:22 a.m. This time I woke up. Looked at phone.
5. However, the first call she said,
Mark called 6:26 a.m. Phone was on vibrate. I looked at phone and went back to sleep.
6. Apparently, Miss Silisky has the ability to look at the phone without waking up. 7. Translated.
Screw the kids.
8. Why would Miss Silisky call the gatehouse to see if Mr. Stengel had come by? 8a. Confession she had staged. The kids were going when they weren't. 8b. To see if Mr. Stengel attempted to gain access. Danger. Danger. 9. Quiet. The kids are sleeping. 10. Even Scott calls. 11. How would Miss Silisky know what Scott did or did not tell his father? 12. In response to the text. Confession Scott sent a text as well, therefore informed via phone and text. 13. And, for yet another confession, Miss Silisky states,
I texted him and said I'd have them call as soon as they wake up.
14. Therefore, with foreknowledge, she was not even going to wake them up, even putting her phone on vibrate, so Alex or Maya would not hear it ring, even if they were already awake. 15. Translated.
Screw Alex and Maya. Screw you. Screw the bar mitzvah boy. And, screw Valerie Lehman, who I conned into thinking the kids were coming.
16. Yes, Mr. Berg and company received all of that as well. 17. Most importantly, danger. Danger. Mr. Berg. Mr. $62,000 plus of uncertainty. Mr. Berg. Note, they even had a birthday cake there for Maya. Mr. Berg. Mr. Leon W. Berg.
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
Almost forgot. Dated July the 6th, 2011. A letter from Mr. Lazaro to Bradford G. Carney, hand-delivered, states,
Dear Brad, my office attempted to get in touch with you last week to request my clients being able to take the children to a bar mitzvah in New Jersey. Because we did not hear back from you, my client did not get to take the children.
Note 1. Miss Silisky fabricates her own notes. 2. Calls Mr. Bradford G. Carney. 3. Manufacture a bill. 4. Judge it sends now has evidence. 5. Besides, Miss Silisky told both children the reason they could not go to the bar mitzvah was because Mr. Stengel didn't sign a paper, and she didn't want Mr. Stengel to get into trouble. Huh? 6. That information is also in an email received by Mr. Berg and their crime ring. 7. The false and fabricated garbage is held by the R Strikers as a security bank in charge of fraud holdings. 8. Uprooting children, false testimony, false letters disparaging Mr. Stengel, fraud holdings, and the R Strikers, deep into evil actions. Which side will they surface on? Supporting evil, or not evil? Will they report Miss Silisky's many child abuses to the authorities? It further states,
We are now requesting that my client be allowed to take the children to New Jersey and Delaware, because he vacations at the Jersey Shore with his family. He would of course have to travel through Delaware to get there.
Note 1. Mr. Berg, won't it be good for the children to vacation where they have been since they were born? 2. You were not getting involved. We understand, Mr. Leon W. Berg. 3. That never happened. 4. And your clients, Mr. Berg. Where do they fit in? 5. Show us where it's been provided to anyone, at any time, in any form, whatsoever. Mr. Berg. Mr. Leon W. Berg.
I think you should think long and hard before you say a gentleman who has probably shown more concern for these children than anyone else in this room.
Although Mr. Lazaro did not copy that letter to Mr. Berg or Dr. Killeen, Mr. Stengel did. On July the 18th, 2011, at 12:09 p.m., to Robert Lazaro, Dr. Catherine Killeen and Leon W. Berg, repeating Miss Sileski's psychotic response to the children, both already aware it was just another lie, who later mentioned this to their father. Mr. Stengel states, "Hi, regarding the bar mitzvah, Susie was telling Alex and Maya that the reason they could not go was because there was a paper or contract that I did not sign, and that she did not want me to get in trouble. No kidding." Note, that flies in the face of Miss Sileski's own notes where she states,
6:30. Never heard from Mark's attorney about the bar mitzvah. Brad decided we should just wait to hear from Lazaro. Never did.
Further noting at the bottom, notes the attached file from Mr. Lazaro. July the 6th, 2011, attorney letter regarding New Jersey and Delaware. As Mr. Stengel documented, the so-called experts were also receiving what Mr. Stengel considered to be in the best interest of his children. Fact, no response was ever received by anyone, nor any mention whatsoever.
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
Reality. 1. Tell daughter her father brought her balloons. 2. Even if an evildoer was scamming, danger, brought balloons. Why not protect Maya, a 9-year-old little girl, and tell her someone brought her balloons? 3. Game over. Daughter happy. Have a nice birthday. 4. Or pick door number fraud. 5. Abuse and violate as needed. 6. Since we don't have any evidence on Mr. Stengel, as Mr. Carney himself said,
And the more work I did, the more frustrating it became because I just kept coming up empty.
7. Therefore they have to use every opportunity to manufacture it.
How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth?
Today's June 1st, 2011. I'm with my dad. It's on one site. Tonight's around 8:30 p.m. And it's been really crazy that past few days. Mom called the cops. There's the cop cars because of backpack and paper bags. Earlier before that, Mom was she got angry at me because I was talking something, I forget what. And then I was in my bed and she showed me what Dad did, which was a lie, complete lie. She twisted my arm on purpose. She twisted it hard, and I'm really hurt. And she started poking me the heck out of me really hard, really hurt. It's been just crazy. She flips out every second, and she's trying to bribe me not to talk to it. It's crazy. So that's what's happening. So frustrated about it. Anyways, Scott's in Aruba, and every now and then I sing the song Aruba, Jamaica. Ooh, I wanna take her to the Uber, Bahama. Come on, little mama, Bahama. But take her, you know that? Yeah, that's what it is. Alright.
Mr. Stengel files a complaint with the Attorney Oversight Commission. On July the 22nd, 2013, Mr. Leon W. Berg provides a 50-page response, containing knowingly false statements, lies, omissions, redirects and more, to the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland. On page number 5, in regards to Mr. Stengel requiring therapeutic supervision, due to Mr. Stengel allegedly disparaging Miss Sileski to the children, states,
The best interest attorney assured Mr. Levy that this is not a case where there was concern that Dad would show up under the influence of alcohol, or that he would threaten physical harm. It was the father's communications with the children that required the supervision.
Translated,
Do not allow Mr. Stengel the opportunity to inform his children, we are all intentionally abusing them. Especially how many of our members are actually involved in their systematic abuses.
First we focus on the last part.
It was the father's communications with the children that required the supervision.
Note,
the best interest attorney assured Mr. Levy that this is not a case where there was concern that Dad would show up under the influence of alcohol, or that he would threaten physical harm.
That statement made by Mr. Leon W. Berg flies in the face of everyone who testified or filed otherwise, which will include everyone in their crime ring. The statement simply, 1. confesses to him aware Ms. Silsky's constant perjurious filing some testimony since her first one on November the 29th, 2010, about fear is bullshit. Therefore fraud. 2. confesses his own expert sworn testimony, and Mr. Berg's suborning the entire druggie scam was a scam. 3. confesses his own expert sworn testimony, and Mr. Berg's suborning the entire danger person is a scam. Reality. Mr. Berg points to his so-called expert witness Dr. Catherine Killeen as his scapegoat. Although Mr. Berg's response to the commission contradicts his and his own expert sworn testimony. This about 2.5 years after Mr. Berg was fully informed of the realities, backed with hard evidence. From day one, Mr. Berg did what was best for Mr. Berg. Period. Besides, the level of Mr. Berg's chosen words are not in the eyes of danger. To further entrench Mr. Leon W. Berg in his own fraud and abuses, the mere fact Mr. Berg can assure Mr. Levy, or anyone for that matter, says volumes about any and all that which they collectively provided to the courts, relating to any party in this matter, is 100% false. Mr. Berg and his crime ring collectively ran in a virtual world. Freely, where they took as needed, from whomever as needed, abusing any and all in their paths. You will not find relevant information provided by any of them, related to the children's best interest, or even wishes. You can place any two kids there. Or their lies, redirects, or whatever they provided in regards to Miss Silsky, was, is, and will forever be, false, and they are all well aware of those facts, as they are the designers. Saving the biggest for last. Everything they said about Mr. Stengel was and is 100% false, or committed a crime to obtain. Therefore, with none of what was provided by Mr. Leon W. Berg and the others, matching the actual people, the participants are irrelevant. Mr. Berg, where do the children fit in? Can you show us?
Where do the children fit in? Can you show us?
Where do the children fit in? Can you show us?
Where do the children fit in? Can you show us?
Your attempt to have Mr. Stengel federally prosecuted for what was simply providing evidence of your crimes, although it failed, was that in the children's best interest. Mr. Berg, that required you, Mr. Leon W. Berg, to also knowingly lie to one or more federal agents. The same with your crime ring having Mr. Stengel wrongfully incarcerated. The state dropped the case after receiving Mr. Karsiski's 148-page sampling of Miss Silsky's serious criminal activity spanning years. Not one never mentioned by you, Mr. Berg. Are we to believe you, Mr. Berg, or Mr. Karsiski? Again, one is complete bullshit, and the other contains hard evidence. Mr. Berg, Mr. Leon W. Berg. Then, Mr. Berg states,
it was the father's communications with the children that required the supervision.
Really, Mr. Leon W. Berg, the father's communication with the children about their mother. Really. Included in the insane number of videos provided to Mr. Berg. And what about this?
Absolutely. Yes, he will. Then he will see a full picture of what you're like. Right. And David Ottschrecker can tell him.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he can.
There's stuff about David in there too.
Yeah, David, the attorney, and the
right.
man who's unemployed for
the
3
attorney,
years.
Right? The attorney whose
Mark,
wife did what?
You haven't worked in 3 years.
Only still an attorney because I didn't provide these film to people. Otherwise, he wouldn't get a job.
It's ridiculous.
Here are more samples of Mr. Leon W. Berg's lies to the Oversight Commission, where in regards to Miss Silsky's crimes spanning over decade to current, states,
again, the recurrent theme is that Mr. Stengel presents what he considers to be evidence of his wife's misconduct or dishonesty.
Fact, the recurrent theme, Mr. Leon W. Berg, is you and your crime rings, fraud and child predatory acts, and abuses to schools, teachers, police, and everyone in your path. Not only is it not Mr. Stengel who disparages his children's mother to them, but the complete opposite, it is also you and your crime ring at every turn disparaging Mr. Stengel. Even brainwashing and conning people like Alyssa Meister Friedman to do the same, even if it requires committing perjury. Then you file fraudulent gag orders, in cooperation with your crime ring judges, to prevent your victims from seeing things like this. Crimes, to cover up crimes. MarylandGate.com. Mr. Leon W. Berg, the $62,000 plus best interest attorney, please explain how you were provided this as well, yet no mention, other than what you knew to be false. In fact, it's not whether or not you knew it was true or false. That would be opposites. You deal in extremes. You state it is Mr. Stengel's action or actions, when in fact you are well informed it is Miss Silisky who is guilty of those very actions/allegations. Or you knowingly repeat others' falsities and or false statements, as some redirect of fraud. This scenario is repeated time and time again.
It was the father's communications with the children that required the supervision.
Today is February 4th, and spring is coming early because the groundhog didn't see a shadow and said spring is coming early. And the things have been the same. Dad trying to talk to Mom over like different things. They go out and talk to each other. But Mom's really mean because Dad's ringtone is Bad to the Bone. It's like, it's like weird. Bad to the bone, I'm just bad to the bone. It's weird. And so that's what's been happening. I just got to Dad's, and today is Friday. So that's what's been happening in the past couple days.
It was the father's communications with the children that required the supervision.
Let's make this easy. Where is anything any of you provided which matches any of the alleged 4 clients? Almost forgot. Sourced evidence required. Let's listen to just one of Mr. Liam W. Berg's confessions. This one relating to his state-required independent assessment. On 2.2, it clearly states,
The child's best interest attorney makes an independent assessment.
Contrary to what Mr. Rudo said, very little of my perspective on this case had much to do with what Ms. Selesky said, or didn't say, or did, or didn't do. My view of the case was based upon the advice given to me by my expert witness, my court-appointed expert witness, who had spent about 40 hours, and I'm trying to recall from an earlier petition, of direct FaceTime with the parties and the children, who together with me interviewed teachers, who together with me reviewed various records.
That was in response to Mr. Stengel's filing to have Mr. Berg removed as best interest attorney. Mr. Berg's response, in his fraudulent efforts as best interest attorney, to continue alienating his actions, and the actions of others, against what is obviously not, or never was, in the children's best interest. Mr. Berg states he ignored, not just Miss Selesky's hundreds of psychotic actions and abuses, but his own conduct, and Maryland state rules. He further states his collusion and conspiracy with his own, only called expert, Dr. Catherine Killeen, stating,
Who together with me interviewed teachers, who together with me reviewed various records.
Yet states he relied on Dr. Catherine Killeen. There are others where Mr. Berg confesses to not doing independent assessments. Less than 2 months earlier, on July the 22nd, 2013, Mr. Liam W. Berg, in his 50-page response, containing knowingly false statements, lies, omissions, and redirects, to the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland, on page number 4 at number 13 states,
He denies the allegation in paragraph 13, to the extent that it suggests that the best interest attorney was not acting independently, and strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Note, here Mr. Berg denies the allegation he was not acting independently, yet 2 months later, Mr. Berg confesses to doing just that. Reality, the documented collusion and conspiracy in their own bills, appears to be never-ending.
Who together with me interviewed teachers, who together with me reviewed various records.
To the extent that it suggests that the best interest attorney was not acting independently, and strictly on behalf of the minor children, and strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Allegations equals confession, and extremes. Therefore, confessing, Mr. Berg never acted in the children's best interest. Besides,
and strictly on behalf of the minor children.
For another puzzle piece, and extremes tactic example, Mr. Berg was representing his own expert, Dr. Killeen, in getting her fraud bills paid by Mr. Stengel from the beginning, and during this very time frame.
And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Such as this small sample of a couple of puzzle pieces, called reality. On page number 2 we have Mr. Liam W. Berg's bill notes,
June 21, 2011, communication with Dr. Killeen regarding affidavit. And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
And, just a few lines down, we have Mr. Liam W. Berg's bill notes.
June 27, 2011, preparation of affidavits for 2 motions, review and revise. Meet with Dr. Killeen. Telephone call with Dr. Killeen. 0.90 hours, for $270.
Note, therefore, Mr. Berg is representing Dr. Killeen and preparing her affidavit.
And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
And, just 4 days later, comes this. Dr. Killeen has not completed her so-called evaluation, yet on July 1, 2011, files her
affidavit in support of response by best interest attorney to defendant's motion to compel plaintiff to pay private school expenses, etc.
As it begins,
I, Catherine W. Killeen, Ph.D., do hereby swear.
Note, how is that even possible, in regards to 1. Impartial, 2. Unethical actions by both Mr. Berg and Dr. Killeen, 3. Coming to any conclusion, while in the middle of her so-called evaluation, 4. What in the world does Dr. Killeen's role have anything at all to do with financial issues?
And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Yet, 2 months after this obvious fraud and unethical actions, and in regards to doing what is in Maya's best interest, comes this. Although Dr. Killeen, the so-called impartial expert, upon Mr. Stengel's request for help in early September, could not even make a suggestion to assist in something as crucial as getting Maya back into school, where Dr. Killeen's email states, subject,
regarding Maya and school. Mr. Stengel, I agree that resolving Maya's school situation quickly is of the utmost importance. Unfortunately, as an evaluator, I am unable to provide you with any suggestions or recommendations.
And of course, like all of their collective counterfeiting of orders and fraud bills, Mr. Bradford Carney is deep, very deep, into the actions and crimes.
And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Go on, show just one more.
Mr. Liam W. Berg's bill notes.
January 12, 2012, preparation of motion regarding K. Killeen's fees, telephone call with K. Killeen. 3.40 hours, for $1,020.
Therefore, Mr. Berg, during the same time, is representing Dr. Killeen as well. This, in getting Dr. Killeen's counterfeit orders and fraud bills paid by Mr. Stengel.
And strictly on behalf of the minor children.
Besides,
to the extent that it suggests that the best interest attorney,
Mr. Stengel never suggested anything. Rather, he flat out directly accused Mr. Berg, and backed it all up with hard evidence. Like Mr. Berg's own words. Let's look at what Mr. Liam W. Berg, and his only called expert, advised the courts, in total, regarding Miss Silisky. Is Dr. Catherine Killeen evil? Dr. quits for non-payment, but really to avoid cross-examination. This will always be known as the paragraph. The paragraph that nails the coffin shut, they thought. After 3+ hours of Dr. Catherine Killeen's colluded, false testimony on December 1, 2011, regarding the father, lasting 80 pages, where all evidence points in the complete opposite direction. What was sworn to in total, about the mother, so Judge Martin could make a fair and rational decision, extremely crucial to the children's lives, was completely contained in this one paragraph.
I think Mr. Stengel's he's got some real tough work ahead of him. I'm not trying to paint Ms. Stengel as perfect by a long shot. I think she's got her difficulties, she's got her issues. I think she has taken on to address some of them in a responsible way. And I think she's also had to just sort of, live a little bit of a bunker mentality, because you can see the amount of material that's come down in this case. And I'm not personally involved, and there have been many a day where I have just felt overwhelmed. So I can't imagine that a reasonable person, including the kids, would feel overwhelmed. That's the end of my testimony.
The children lose 100% communication with their stay-at-home father. Ongoing question, is anything you have seen, or will see, reflected in this paragraph? Case is still going on. Father will never give up on his children. Let's listen to Dr. Catherine Killeen's crime partner, Psychotics Judith Enza, reference what Dr. Killeen is swearing to under oath and the penalty of perjury, in total regarding Miss Silisky described as issues and difficulties, both which can be handled with a psychologist.
Mr. Rudo, I already know that Miss Stengel hasn't always been honest. I know that. I know she lied to a police officer because she had Mr. Stengel's phone when she said she didn't. So I know that. And I didn't escape my notice that there were several discrepancies in the financial statements. In fact, in that hearing we had, that lasted several days, it was like every day. Actually, I would get a before lunch and after lunch amendment. So, I mean...
Besides Psychotics Enza's confessions of knowing Miss Silisky lies to police, files false financials, Miss Silisky will commit perjury at will, and repeat the same egregious criminal acts to the same judge's face, over and over. Mr. Berg, Mr. Leon W. Berg. That concludes the How in the World, Maya's birthday portion. The idea was good. Take balloons, tie them up, turn around, and leave. However, the crime ring just would not allow anything remotely related to what was in Maya's best interest, or opposing their pre-designed fraud and alienation tactics, so it was ignored. Ignored? Not good enough. Must turn around and fit into their manufactured 100% virtual world. Now, some realities, as we further define evil. Confirmed by the simple fact they have all been well informed by Mr. Stengel that very day. Clearly noting 1. Maya wanted to spend some time with her father on her birthday. 2. Mr. Stengel wanted to send her something, however Miss Silisky refused, telling him the apartment number where they recently moved. 3. Mr. Stengel simply wanted to tie the balloons to the door of her van. The next alternative was the gate, with permission. 4. At no time, during the years of this same known designed fraud being brought up, then, billed for, did Mr. Berg ever mention anything. 5. Mr. Leon W. Berg will sit and watch hot lava roll over children, if need be. 6. Mr. Berg refuses to get involved, but only in regards to resolving an issue. 7. Mr. Berg refuses to get uninvolved in creating the chaos, fraud, abuses, and especially as BIA Berg's interest always. And, not to disappoint, what does Judge Judith Enza have to disparage Mr. Stengel about in those very regards? Class. We already know, it's allegations equals confessions. So let's get right to it.
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
Really?
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
Allegations equals confessions. And evidence. Mr. Stengel continually provided evidence that he was providing evidence of your psychotic crime rings, constant criminal actions, to the intentional detriment of his children, and anyone that got in your evil way. Mr. Berg, Mr. Leon W. Berg. What say you, Mr. Leon W. Berg? White-collar child trafficking.
You have no idea who I am.
Voted Best Interest Parent by Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen. Even though they refused to obtain Miss Silisky's medical records, after Dr. Killeen noted speaking with her primary care doctor for 30 minutes. Miss Silisky's medical records show long-term mental illness. Leon W. Berg or Dr. Catherine Killeen both refused to provide a scintilla of Miss Silisky's medical history. That even includes the psychological tests given to Miss Silisky by Dr. Catherine Killeen and billed for. Yet, Dr. Catherine Killeen and Leon W. Berg both demanded Mr. Stengel pay for those very tests. The results provided under oath and the penalty of perjury by Dr. Catherine Killeen, and suborned by Leon W. Berg, regarding Mr. Stengel, was later contradicted by the same psychological tests ordered by the state of Maryland from an independent source, chosen by the state. Go figure.
You don't even let your wife talk, ever. You don't even let me, because that's what it feels like. So you come, I do too. Mark! No! Because I realize you're on the floor. On the fucking floor! You're an asshole! On the floor! You fucking asshole! I hate you! I don't want to be your goddamn floor! You're gonna fucking beat the shit out of you. I'm not your floor.
But I did sit there today and think to myself, I really wish she was here. And I wish we were holding hands and we were watching the movie. Doesn't matter what I wish.
You have no idea who I am.
He's staying in a sick house. He's not sick. It's the only ball we got. Understand? And he's sitting here on his computer. I think you should videotape all kinds of stuff. He's sitting here on his videotape on his computer.
I'm playing on the go-to-mypoint.com.
Miss Stengel. This is Officer Boulevard.
I can't even hear you, but I'm going to
Hold on.
right now.
Hold on. Listen.
Ma'am. This is Officer Bell with Baltimore County Police Department. Your husband actually went to the kitchen and tried to find the phone, and he's saying it's not there. Where exactly in the kitchen did you put the phone?
I don't remember, ma'am. I was on the phone with my friend, and when his phone rang, and I went to pick it up, and I went to open it, and he changed his password, so I couldn't do it, so I must have put it down. His phone hasn't been stolen, if that's what he thinks. Is that what he's thinking?
Yes, ma'am. So we need to know where the phone is.
Okay, ma'am. I don't know where the phone is at this very moment, but I'm not a thief, and I didn't take his phone. So when I get home, I will hand him his phone. I'm sure I will find it. Okay, he lost his phone the other day, and his son found it. If cameras all over the house, maybe his camera can locate it for him. I don't know. But I don't have it.
You don't have it.
Excuse me?
You sure you don't have it?
I'm absolutely positive.
Okay.
Okay? I'm positive I don't have it. I mean, I'm not sure why my husband is now calling the police every time something happens in our house.
Because apparently you guys were involved in a domestic dispute, and he called the police to try to settle it. And you decided to leave the home.
When were we in a domestic dispute?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I did pick it up. It was ringing, but I didn't know your password. So I put it down. It's got to be in the kitchen somewhere. I did pick it up. It was on the couch, right?
My phone was ringing?
It was ringing, and I went to pick it up, and I asked Alex if he knew your password. He said no.
Right.
You never asked me to my password.
Yes, I did. You were watching Avatar. I certainly did. I looked right at you, and I said, what's his password?
I didn't hear. I don't know his password.
He's staying in a sick house. He's not sick. It's the only ball we got. Understand? And he's sitting here on his computer. I think you should videotape all kinds of stuff. He's sitting here on his videotape on his computer.
I'm playing on the go-to-mypoint.com.
She's going psycho.
I'm sorry, guys.
She's going psycho.
Don't want to live with each other. Go to the courthouse. Get protective orders against each other. Do what you have to do.
I agree
Once you
with
get
that.
the protective order against your wife, once your wife gets a protective order against you,
Can't
then
get
both
near
of you
me.
will be out of the house, and both of you don't have to be in the house at all, because you'll both be barred from coming back to this home.
Great idea!
Now,
I can bar him from his own home.
With that,
That's a fabulous
you won't come back. You won't come back. Everybody will be.
She's going psycho.
I'm sorry, guys.
She's going psycho.
I'm kind of screwed in this way because he hasn't physically hurt me. I think she's trying to find someone, and I think I may have found that person, who will say he could potentially hurt me or the children because he's a loose candidate. Okay, so I think that's what she's looking for. If she has that, then she can extend the protective order, which is really what the goal is. I'm kind of screwed in this way because he hasn't physically hurt me.
Now, you're not in trouble for getting into his account, are you? Because I would crack his password for you to do this.
Invoice number 45943, dated September 7th of 2011, contains an entry for watching the Truth About Susie video. There should be no video. No one should be watching a video.
What about this video, taken during Property Exchange Day, and just 2 weeks after Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney becomes involved? What are Mr. Carney's plans and tactics? Let's listen, as Miss Silisky, herself, will tell us one of them. This while Kelly Weinberg is present, and assisting Miss Silisky.
Could you please get out of my face, you ugly son of a bitch? Get out of my face. Oh, are you videotaping? Hi, he's a crook. Can't wait till you end up in prison. Can't wait till you end up in prison.
We now listen to Judge Judith Enser's own confession. 1. Already heard, using Mr. Carney's bills for deciding reality. 2. However, she reviewed all 6 volumes in the case. Translated evidence. 3. Bury the fraud. Note, the audio will catch up with the screenshot shown.
May I ask a housekeeping question, Your Honor? Do you want one comprehensive order that deals with all your rulings today on all the different motions?
Yes.
You want separate orders for everything?
No, I don't think so. I think the whole kit and caboodle, because if this is going to the Court of Special Appeals, or if it ends up going to some other judge, I frankly, and I'm not boo-hooing about this, I'm not, but I don't want anyone to have to do what I did. I don't. I want someone to be able to look at my decision today and that chronology I gave and the order that you're going to provide to me, and I want them to be able to move forward from those documents.
Okay.
I don't want anyone to have to read these 6 volumes. I don't.
I understand.
What about our rights? What about our rights? What about the children's rights?
Sorry kids, the money train left the station. We understand you love your daddy. However, we have fraud businesses to run. Whatever your own experiences are, and have been, you must come to learn are delusional. Our information that does not match your own experiences, is to be your reality. Remember kids, we are the experts. Now, get the hell back in line and behave.
Mr. Liam W. Berg, it appears to be falling apart, in front of everyone. What are your plans on keeping all of this together? Can you show us where you put on the record what your crime ring partner Judith Enser said regarding Miss Silisky? You said Miss Silisky's actions were neither misconduct or dishonest. It appears to be things a prosecutor would handle, not a therapist. Can you match anything to reality? You pick it. Otherwise, it will become obvious, like everything. The next part is a confession of your crime ring's psychological warfare on everyone. Kids, schools, police, and on and on. Unethical psychologist forces children into delusional world. Some may ask the father, so why publicly expose this? How can this be a good thing for the children? It was answered by Dr. Catherine Killeen on pages 54 to 55. Transcript December the 1st, 2011, pages number 54 to 55.
So what happens when somebody's being kind of spoon-fed or force-fed a worldview that doesn't really match with their experiences is that you're undermining their sense of reality. And that to me is the most damaging of all. Because if I can't trust my judgment about what's real and what's not real, I am in big trouble. I don't know what people to trust. I don't know what institutions to trust. It undermines any sense of self-integrity, self-confidence. It's a very, very devastating condition, and it sets up...
And would it be more so at Alex's particular age?
When we are done, hopefully we will be successful at shoving our delusion down your throats as reality. And your own experiences, with your mother and father, your reality, you must come to realize, you are just delusional.
In reading any of Dr. Catherine Killeen's sworn testimony under oath and the penalty of perjury, in order to keep their colluded story straight, they simply switched the names. Guess what happens when you read Dr. Killeen's testimony? like her 80 pages regarding the father, and replace the father with the mother. All the evidence, magically, lines up.
Can't wait till you end up in prison.
Authorizing child abuse. The stolen recorder. Working development research stage. Agreement. Pause to read. Minimum age of 18 required. Exposing child abuses. This stolen audio recorder presentation resembles how this crime ring operated, regardless of who or what was being dealt with. We will keep things in the timeline order to better understand what information was provided and by whom. The viewer's only task is to imagine the daughter as your own 8-year-old daughter. Mr. Liam W. Berg begins as best interest attorney for the minor children on January 6, 2011. Dr. Catherine Killeen begins on January 7, 2011 as child custody evaluator and to complete extensive psychological tests on both parents. As seen in Dr. Catherine Killeen's own bills, she reviewed Mr. Stengel's interrogatories on September 8, 2011 for $3,000. Mr. Liam W. Berg's bills, also not him reviewing the same interrogatories. Mr. Stengel provided his answers to interrogatories sometime in June of 2011. Answer interrogatory number 14. Number 14, read number 12. There is not enough room on these pages to list things Susie has done just in the last 6 months. Susie cares about Susie. It's not a choice, it's just how it is. She will always put herself first. Susie will let her own kids take the fall for something she did. Example, the USB wireless mouse receiver Susie stole out of my computer. Let me repeat that. Susie will let her own kids take the fall for something she did. Note, that does not include this provided stolen cell phone fiasco, where Miss Sileski also threw them under the bus, stating she spoke to them, when the video clearly shows that to be false.
Staying in a sick house is not successful. It's the only ball we got. Understand? And he's sitting here on his computer. I think you should videotape all kinds of stuff. He's sitting here on his videotape on his computer.
And playing on the gotomypoints.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I did pick it up. It was ringing, but I didn't know your password. So I put it down. It's got to be in the kitchen somewhere. I did pick it up. It was on the couch. Right?
My phone was ringing?
It was ringing, and I went to pick it up, and I asked Alex if he knew your password. He said no.
Right.
You never asked me to know my password.
Yes, I did. You were watching Avatar. I certainly did. I looked right at you, and I said, what's his password?
I'm in here.
What all took place just in that 31 seconds? 1. It was ringing. False. 2. She didn't know the password. True. C. John Seville, hacker. 3. So I put it down. False. 4. It's got to be in the kitchen somewhere. False. 5. Is it on the couch? False. 6. Besides, the couch is not in the kitchen. 7. She repeats. It was ringing. False again. 8. I asked Alex if he knew your password. False. 9. Speaks for the source. He said no. 10. Alex says she never asked him about the password. 11. Attacks and bullies the source saying, yes, I did. 12. Again, attacks and bullies the source, saying, I certainly did. 13. I looked right at you. False. 14. I said what's the password? False. 15. Maya confirms it, saying, she didn't hear. Note, got all of that in just 31 seconds. Reality versus evil psychosis. Nearly 2 per second. And 12 minutes later, lied to police officer Bell about taking the phone. Even adding more bullshit, like it may be in the laundry room. Anyway, let's watch both again. Then we will move on.
Staying in a sick house is not successful. It's the only ball we got. Understand? And he's sitting here on his computer. I think you should videotape all kinds of stuff. He's sitting here on his videotape
On his computer?
And playing on the gotomypoints.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, I did pick it up, it was ringing, but I didn't know your password. So I put it down, it's gotta be in the kitchen somewhere. I did pick it up, it was on the couch, right?
My phone was ringing?
It was ringing, and I went to pick it up, and I asked Alex if he knew your password, he said no.
Right.
You never asked me to my password.
Yes, I did, you were watching Avatar, I certainly did, I looked right at you, and I said, what's his password?
I didn't hear, I don't know.
This next incident is less than 4 weeks after Dr. Killeen reviewed the interrogatories. October the 5th, 2011, time 1810. Police report number 11-278-1424. Officer R.D. Miller, number 5198. Victim, Mark Stengel. Note, this report notes the incorrect victim. The recorder's owner is Mr. Stengel's oldest son, Scott, who lent the recorder to his younger brother, Alex, as he requested to do an audio journal, so he could later hear what he sounded like when he was 10. Scott was the person who called the police to make the report. Scott was in the Annapolis area, while Mr. Stengel and the children were heading home to Owings Mills, where Officer Miller met with them, as Scott was on the phone during much of the time. Upon receiving this incorrect report, Mr. Stengel contacted Officer Miller, advising him as such, and requested the report be corrected. It appears Officer Miller never corrected his error. We continue with the report's notes.
On the above date and time I was dispatched to the above location, in reference to a theft. Upon arrival I was met by victim Stengul, who advised that he was told by his daughter, interviewee Maya Stengul, that
her mother, interviewee Susan Stengel, told her to steal her father's voice recorder.
Victim Stengel advised that he discovered it missing several days ago, and when he originally confronted interviewee Maya Stengel about it,
she lied, stating that she did not want him to be mad at her.
Victim Stengel asked interviewee Maya Stengel why she took the item, at which time he stated that she began crying, and stated to him that
she sees what happens to her brother Alex Stengel when he doesn't listen to interviewee Susan Stengel, and she does not want the same thing to happen to her.
Interviewee Maya Stengel was at the location at the time of reporting. I asked interviewee Maya Stengel in the presence of victim Stengel what happened with the voice recorder. She stated
that she was told to take it from the location by her mother.
She stated that
it is normally left on the kitchen counter, which is where she retrieved it from.
She stated that interviewee Susan Stengel
listened to the recordings, then forwarded the recorder to her lawyer.
This officer did not ask about any possible abuse or any other possible incidents that were mentioned by victim Stengel. I also spoke with interviewee Susan Stengel via telephone. Interviewee Susan Stengel advised that she
is in possession of the recorder.
She stated that
the daughter Maya Stengel took the recorder on her own and hid it in the home.
Interviewee Susan Stengel advised that
when she found it, she questioned Maya Stengel, who refused to comment.
She stated that
Maya Stengel told her that she took the item from her father because she did not like her father using it against interviewee Susan Stengel.
At that time she stated that
she listened to the device, then forwarded it to her lawyer.
Lieutenant Pasco, direct on current incident as well as past incidents.
We could spend quite some time dissecting that, however, we will only note, 1. Maya notes seeing her brother Alex abused. 2. She is afraid of her mother. 3. This, just one day following the police report of October the 4th, 2011, where the son, Alex, reported being beaten up, thrown against a wall, then not allowed to contact his father, even with a court order in place. Hence the no phone access, police report. 4. Who reported being abused, to his school, Boys Latin, who contacted, not the authorities, rather Mr. Leon W. Berg. 5. Miss Siliski lied again to the police. 6. Miss Siliski threw her own daughter under the bus. 7. In connecting sentences, she states Maya had no comment, then states what Maya said.
When she found it, she questioned Maya Stengel, who refused to comment.
She stated that
Maya Stengel told her that she took the item from her father because she did not like her father using it against interviewee Susan Stengel.
8. Maya was also aware of what her mother did with the recorder. 8. Maya was also aware of what her mother did with the recorder.
Listened to the recordings, then forwarded the recorder to her lawyer.
Note, the only people that knew about Alex's journal recordings were Mr. Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen, only because Alex requested his father send them some of the recordings. Just 1 week later, on October the 12th, 2011, Mr. Stengel further documents the realities.
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
This is one of the 84 emails Mr. Stengel sent to Dr. Killeen. It will be very clear why they only talked about the false quantities and never mentioned the content of any email. On Wednesday, October the 12th, 2011, at 10:03 p.m., Mr. Stengel sent an email with the subject, "Susie uses Maya to steal personal, private property." The email is sent to Catherine Killeen, Leon W. Berg, Robert Lazaro, and BCC, Scott Stengel. The email states, "Hello, Susie had Maya steal Scott's audio recorder that Alex used as his personal journal. Scott and I had personal things on there as well. Scott called the police to make the report. Maya told the officer she knew it was wrong but did it because her mother told her to. The officer Miller said, Maya is the one who committed the crime. Officer Miller, who also has been snowed by Susie, not anymore, told Maya, if her mother asks her to do things that do not feel right, ask your dad or call your brother. I am waiting for the report and will forward it when I get it." Scott could give you more details, as he spoke with Maya and the officer as well. Susie told Alex that I called the police on Maya, which is exactly what Bob said, Susie's attorney said happened. About 2 weeks ago, Maya told me she has a feeling inside that makes her stop and go back. Susie will chip away at it, until Maya will be as disconnected as her mother. This was not the first time she used Maya in this way. The last time, when I stopped Maya, she said that Mom said, if it is going from one house to the other, it is not considered stealing. Mark Stengel. That's pretty clear, as Mr. Stengel intended. Receiving their normal, complete opposite to reality, actions, or reactions, Mr. Stengel further documented, he was in fact documenting, he was providing them all with facts and details. Giving special note to what Maya told her father, that her mother said. Advising the experts of the following. 1. Miss Silisky clearly disparaging Mr. Stengel to Maya. 2. Falsely as well, as it was Scott who called the police. 3. Not on Maya, rather on Miss Silisky, for having his little sister Maya steal his recorder. 4. Forcing Maya, in the experience herself, into a delusional world. 5. And the same lie, Mr. Stengel's alleged attorney, Mr. Robert Wayne Lazaro, a.k.a. the Mole, said, Mr. Carney told him. Besides the fact, they were provided Scott's phone records as well. Note, this just 8 weeks before Mr. Leon W. Berg questions his only called witness, and an expert witness, Dr. Catherine Killeen, who falsely testified, on December 1, 2011, on this very subject, evidence, and events, as Leon W. Berg suborned to perjury.
Last question. Two questions. Are you aware that Mr. Stengel's grown son, Scott, who you identified earlier in your testimony, I believe, has filed a replevin action against his mother, his stepmother, to recover an illicit listening device that was positioned somewhere in the marital home?
I am aware of that. I'm aware that there was a police report filed against Maya for having stolen it, and I do believe I have a copy. I didn't really know what to call it, but I may have put it in with a legal file, but I didn't know if it really was a legal pleading. But he did send something to the court with this case number identified on it, seeking some redress.
Was it your understanding, Dr. Killeen, that Mr. Stengel actually called the Baltimore County Police and had them respond to his home when his daughter was there, and have her questioned by them regarding the theft of this listening device that's at the issue of the replevin action, the subject rather of the replevin action?
The extent to which I have an independent third-party information, this is a police report dated 10/5, I believe, and it's very brief, and it does identify well, actually, this identifies the victim as Mark Stengel.
Well, look, let's assume there's a shenanigan going on about some listening device. Would that affect your opinion in any way? Or bolster it?
I think it speaks to...
This can easily take 20 lines, just to list the fraud counts involved, regarding this one section, so we will be brief. 1. Dr. Killeen states, I'm aware there was a police report filed against Maya. Fact, nobody stated that. That was not what Mr. Carney said. Dr. Killeen came up with that on her own, which Mr. Carney repeated afterwards. 2. Independent. Yet the same bullshit story Mr. Stengel documented in his email to Dr. Killeen and Mr. Berg, that Maya was told by her mother, disparaging her father, and documented as complete bullshit. You can begin to understand why they all had a problem with Mr. Stengel's emails. 3. Independent. Yeah, the police report. Oh, that says Mr. Stengel is the victim. Reality, Mr. Carney is Dr. Killeen's independent source. 4. Yes, Your Honor. Regardless of all the fraud just spewed, and extremes tactics used, that in fact bolsters Dr. Killeen's opinion of Mr. Stengel. Really. Note, anyone here any real concern for the 8-year-old little girl, treated like a gypsy? No. Well, stay tuned. Because Mr. Liam W. Berg's response to the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland on July the 22nd, 2013, in regards to the stolen voice recorder.
14, J1, J2-inch, as I recall, the voice recorder was alleged to have been used by Mr. Stengel to make surreptitious recordings of certain conversations. Maya apparently took possession of the recorder and gave it to her mother, who then gave it to her lawyer. I believe that it was Mr. Stengel who called the police to his home to question Maya, then 8 years old, about the voice recorder. This incident was certainly discussed by Dr. Killeen and I, and was not ignored.
This, 1.5 years later, matches Mr. Carney's words, as we just heard. Besides, took possession of the recorder. So it was a good thing. This incident was certainly discussed by Dr. Killeen and I and Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney, for documented collusion in their own bills. And Miss Siliski, and Mr. Robert Lazaro, and Judge Judith Enza, and others. And was not ignored. Class, it was not ignored, it was used for extremes. I believe it was Mr. Stengel who called the police. Really. That's what Mr. Carney said. To question his 8-year-old daughter. Really. That's what Mr. Carney said. Even if that were true, which we know is bullshit. But say we ride the delusional trolley for a second. It would not have been to prevent his daughter from being victimized, and to teach her right from wrong. This, in Mr. Berg's 50 pages of false responses to the Corrupt Attorney Oversight Commission, who refuses to even investigate Mr. Berg, therefore, knowingly allowing him to freely abuse and prey on other families and children, as he wishes. Right, Mr. Glenn Grossman? Just like Scott D. Schellenberger, the Maryland State's Attorney. As Mr. Berg is free, as seen here, to knowingly and falsely attack Mr. Stengel. Oh, his minor client. The little girl. Not Mr. Berg's problem. Just his manufactured, fraudulent revenue stream, and counterfeit orders, printing press. No, we are not done. Next, less than 2 months later, you will hear from Mr. Rudo, Mr. Stengel's attorney, with reality, and the psychotic bully Judge Thisenza, with what may be a top 5 of her most psychotic responses to date.
But what I can say is that, again, there's some unfitness there. There's a lot of unfitness there. There's allegations of abuse that are, documented allegations of abuse, and they're being ignored. There was the instance from October the 5th, 2011, where the police were called to the house because Scott Stengel, Mark's older son from his previous marriage, had complained that Mrs. Stengel stole his voice recorder.
I know, aren't you just...
Well, it concerns me.
Done? Like, there's somebody robbing a bank somewhere.
It just concerns me that Maya seems so afraid to not do what Mrs. Stengel asked, that she would say to the police officer, I'm afraid. It concerns me.
Done? Like, there's somebody robbing a bank somewhere.
It concerns me.
Done? Like, there's somebody robbing a bank somewhere.
Dear psychotic whack job, Mr. Rudo instilling reality and a conscience. Not permitted. Which one? Neither. Not robbing a bank yet, however, she is still just in training. Give her some time. Then when she comes in front of you, later on, you can throw her in prison for it. It's clear how your psychotic, mentally deranged brain works. For now, let's hear from one of your crime ring team members, and only 12 pages later, and what he has to say about his minor client.
To talk about one aspect of this case, a voice recorder not being returned, the mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever, is like the fly describing an elephant by touching its ivory and saying this is what the elephant's all about.
Misinforming? Not lying to the police, forcing any child, Mr. Berg's minor client, to commit a crime, then throwing your minor client under the bus. The most telling part of Mr. Leon W. Berg's statement was not that part at all. Rather his statement, whatever. Let's listen again.
The mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever. The mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever. The mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever.
Whatever. Translated, who gives a shit about the little girl? Who gives a shit about lying to the police? Who gives a shit about someone committing a crime? Who gives a shit about having a little girl commit a crime? Who gives a shit about having your own daughter commit a crime? Who gives a shit about having Mr. Leon W. Berg's minor client committing a crime? Who gives a shit about her doing so out of fear of her mother? Who gives a shit about teaching her to steal? Who gives a shit about then throwing her under the bus? Who gives a shit about slowly chipping away at her conscience? Who gives a shit about knowingly, and with foreknowledge, lying about it in court? Who gives a shit about forcing children into a designed world of delusion? Who gives a shit, period?
The mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever.
In fact, Mr. Leon W. Berg on numerous responses to the Commission, as you will notice, marked above the previously shown lie to the Commission, and our only samples are 2 of his responses, in his 50 pages of knowingly fraudulent responses, where like the rest of the crime ring, goes into their psychotic, rinse and repeat action, redirecting the focus, and attacks. Where he knowingly, with full knowledge and malice, against his minor clients, falsely disparages their father, Mr. Stengel, as the problem. The very reason Dr. Catherine Killeen, Mr. Berg's flexpert, swore under oath, Mr. Stengel requires therapeutic supervision. Class, extremes. Not hot or cold. Rather frozen and on fire. Not true or false. Rather knowingly, falsely accusing one, while knowing full well, the accuser, in fact, did what's being alleged. Allegations equals confessions. Where Mr. Leon W. Berg responds.
Again, the recurrent theme is that Mr. Stengel presents what he considers to be evidence of his wife's misconduct or dishonesty and infers that this evidence must have been ignored by the best interest attorney.
Therefore, Mr. Leon W. Berg's fraud bills, exceeding $62,000 plus, of uncertainty, swears nothing Miss Silisky has done, and continues doing, from Mr. Leon W. Berg, rose, or rises, to the level of misconduct, or dishonesty. Could that be because, to these personality types, it's all normal? Class, do not get sidetracked by thinking Mr. Berg is not defending his clients, and instead defending Miss Silisky. That is not what is happening. Trapped in the documentation for years, from day one, Mr. Leon W. Berg is defending Mr. Leon W. Berg. Let's repeat that. Mr. Leon W. Berg is defending Mr. Leon W. Berg and all of his criminal activity, which began on day one and continues to mount. So true to form, Mr. Leon W. Berg, or Dr. Catherine Killeen, refused to even mention or repeat the numerous crimes Miss Silisky has already confessed to. Confessions made in court, such as Mr. Berg's response to H1, H2, was regarding Miss Silisky's December 22, 2010, fraudulent zero-income statement filing with the courts, and repeated that same fraudulent filing 3 months later, on March 21, 2011, with evidence shown to both Mr. Berg and Dr. Killeen, containing bank statements showing deposits exceeding $89,000 in just two of Miss Zaleski's accounts, and even a witness testifying he paid Miss Zaleski over $4,000. As detailed in episode number 10. This also, while Miss Zaleski is fraudulently collecting over $20,000 in unemployment. And, cons, her over 80-year-old aunt, for $5,000, for legal fees, and the $5,000 winds up in her IRA. And the Attorney Oversight Commission, and Glenn Grossman? Not their problem, but their buddy. Now go, Mr. Berg. Continue preying on other families, and children. Let's talk about something important, like, where are we meeting for lunch? We conclude this presentation, although there is more, there is always more, we conclude with some reality and conscience. After Mr. Stengel was falsely incarcerated for providing evidence of crimes, and as they were running out of options, Mr. Stengel's criminal attorney, Mr. Karseski, provided the state with a 148-page package, which contained just some samplings of Miss Zaleski's criminal activity. After which, the state dropped their fraudulent case, but not before furthering the crime ring's abuses on the public, schools, etc. But that's for a later time. For now, here is what Mr. Karseski wrote on December the 19th, 2014, in regards to the stolen recorder. Scott Stengel's tape recorder, Exhibit Number 6. A Baltimore County Police report. Attached as Exhibit Number 6 is the report of Officer R.D. Miller, Baltimore County Police Department. Nothing could be more disgusting than a mother using her child to commit a crime to advance the mother's self-interests and at the same time, causing a permanent emotional trauma aimed at her own daughter. Not only is Maya, the daughter, emotionally scarred by her mother's actions, but Maya is called upon and caused to act out of fear of her own mother's threatened retaliation if she did not comply. Of course, the collateral damage of the mother's action is quite obvious, causing her daughter to choose one parent over the other. It is quite clear that the report of Maya to the police is truthful and that Ms. Stengel's explanation is a total fabrication. Again, we have evidence that Miss Zaleski will lie at will, provided it advances her needs even at the expense of her own daughter. The reason for Miss Stengel's actions are quite obvious. The recorder contained daily journal entries made by Alex that were most harmful to his mother. She needed to be sure that they never surfaced. She succeeded and the recorder was never returned. It remains with one of her previous family law attorneys, but she still refuses to return it. White-collar child trafficking. The series not only states what is being done, but acts as a tool for unimaginable information to flow. Not only from unimaginable to imaginable, but to actual and current, and more importantly, to reality. Reality. The very thing Team F vehemently and collectively fight against. That too is unimaginable. Even disrespecting every veteran. An entire group, duty-bound to protect the children and public, do the opposite. Time and time again, forever. The observations of adult professionals in their specialized fields, given the task of fighting reality at all costs, and the ways they go about it, by itself is worth the price of admission. Although they collectively make it appear they are arguing with Mr. Stengel, in reality, they are arguing with reality, and their own words and actions, in the face of reality.
How sweet it is!
You Scrooge with the wrong dad.
No, you do not understand. You do not know our dad. You're still here, is proof you are messing with the wrong dad.
You Scrooge with the wrong dad.
You Scrooge with the wrong dad.
Although created, during the then Governor, Martin O'Malley's corrupt administration, Mr. Stengel still has zero communication with his children, as they, and their entire community, continue to be alienated from facts and realities, and the abuse is still being forced upon them. What say you, Governor Larry Hogan? Maybe you can answer this question.
How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth? How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth?
can't wait till you end up in prison.
Over 400 emails. Or 84 emails. Working development research stage. Agreement. Pause to read. Minimum age of 18 required. Exposing fraud.
I went through the bills. I went through them line by line. I studied the descriptions of the work performed, and I considered the rates charged. Part of that review, frankly, was with an eye to determining who was actually driving the litigation. And of course, for that, I only have the pleadings filed and the descriptions delineated in the bills themselves. I do find the hourly rates charged to be fair. I find the time allotted for the tasks performed reasonable. I find that of the almost $200,000 in legal bills, much is attributable to inappropriate actions on the part of Mr. Stengel.
Note, we will only read a few of the red-lined ones, since going line by line regarding emails will be laborious, as there are so many in all their bills. Normally, we will not even highlight the others. Mr. Carney's bill notes.
December 17, 2010. BGC. Read husband's emails to Eileen Shear, Susie, Tamara Basso, and Scott Kirkin. Forward all emails to Chris Nicholson. Open file, draft engagement letter.
Billed 0.80 hours for $300. Note, Mr. Stengel sends a couple emails to people Miss Silisky falsely disparages Mr. Stengel too, and Miss Silisky gets those emails and sends them to Mr. Carney for fraud billing. Mr. Carney then forwards those to Mr. Stengel's attorney, playing toss across for yet more billing, and Mr. Carney had not even been retained yet, as noted in the same entry. Mr. Carney's bill notes.
December 21, 2010. BGC. Read 3 emails from Susie and Kelly.
Billed 0.20 hours for $75. Mr. Carney's bill notes.
December 23, 2010. BGC. Read study and print 38 emails from Susie and many third parties. Draft various email responses.
Billed 4.00 hours for $1,500. Note, for harassing and wrongfully involving others, to assist Miss Silisky in abusing her own children. 38 emails in one shot. Mr. Carney then insists he must respond to ring up more fraud bills. And they all collectively have the same wrong answers. It's Mr. Stengel's doing. Going line by line makes that scam more than obvious. Mr. Carney's bill notes.
December 30, 2010, BGC. Read 6 emails from Susie, 2 calls from / to Susie regarding text of emails.
Billed 1.00 hours for $375. Note, Mr. Carney already rang up over $10,000 in legal bills. We will jump out of the timeline for a while. Regarding emails, how do they all keep coming up with the same wrong answers? Let's take a look. Remember, there are always more than shown. For example, their expert Mr. Feder, Miss Silisky, the line-by-line lady, Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney, Leon W. Berg, Dr. Catherine Killeen, etc. For now, we reviewed just a couple. Also important to note, the 38 emails were also from others continually conned, harassed, and wrongfully involved. 1. On December 1, 2011, on page number 28, keeping everything in the context sworn to, and during Dr. Killeen's 80 pages of false swearing regarding Mr. Stengel, states,
I have reviewed over 400 emails in this case.
Note, over 400. Let's take a quick look at the spread of fraud sheet bills, focusing on that very statement. Going through Dr. Catherine Killeen's bills, line by line, the summary of her own bills reflect the following. Going through every line item throughout Dr. Killeen's bills, documents, 0 time spent reviewing Mr. Stengel's emails. We will uncover the rest in a little while. 2. On August 15, 2012, Mr. Stengel sends out an email documenting their more than obvious, covert actions on this very topic. The email went to Mr. Leon W. Berg and Mr. Stengel's alleged attorney, Mr. Robert Wayne Lazaro, aka The Mole. We will read a good portion of it. August 15, 2012, at 11:17 a.m. email from Mr. Stengel to Robert Lazaro, Leon W. Berg, 2 others, plus Janet Lyman, a therapeutic supervisor. From that scam they all ran. AKA, alienating the children from hearing any truths, and keeping them in delusion. Hello, in some people's effort to increase bills, bravo, you are succeeding, temporarily. If the source of the information is Susie, well, no more needs to be said. You all know that. Smiley face. This is the 3rd, maybe 4th time the same list has been requested and responded to. In fact, I have copied Janet Lyman on this email, since she even referenced this in her report. This is just a game, and who are the profitable entities? After all, why would anyone draft/forward the same, answered, information multiple times? Why would Brad Carney spend time with Susie on the phone, or email, just to draft a letter, maybe $50? To Leon Berg, who reads it, and forwards that, maybe $50, to Bob Lazaro, who reads it, and forwards it to me, maybe $50, for me to read it, and respond to Bob Lazaro, who then has to read my response, and write a response, maybe $50, to Leon Berg, who then has to read my response, answer Brad Carney, maybe $50, who will then respond to Susie, and no doubt listen to her for 20 minutes, maybe $50, and, I am pretty sure she would have also contacted Leon Berg, maybe not, as well at some point during this. What was the request for? A baseball glove. Not only a baseball glove, but my baseball glove that I let Alex use when he misplaced his. How much would it cost Susie to buy a glove for Alex? Maybe $35. This assumes there was only one conversation regarding the glove, and I think there were more. Fact, Susie is/was well aware of the following. 1. Alex did not own a glove. 2. Alex lost 3 gloves already. 3. Because he has lost 3 gloves already, he could only use my glove when I was with him. 4. You all would do what you all did. 5. A glove would only cost about $35. Note, below it notes, at some point, common sense will trump all excuses for one's actions. Note, what was it Judgitis Enzo said about Mr. Stengel's emails?
There are rambling emails and irrelevant subpoenas.
Throughout Dr. Killeen's bills, she documents having spent 2 hours reviewing Miss Aleska's emails. Not to get off track, however, while we are here, we also note Dr. Killeen's documented totals regarding telephone conversations as follows. 1. Miss Silisky spent 3 hours on the telephone. This is just the documented times. 2. Mr. Leon W. Berg spent 12.60 hours. Although both of their contracts, rules and obligations state independent, it appears their own contracts, obligations, and rules governing their specific jobs are all handled merely as suggestions. 3. Mr. Stengel spent 0 hours on the telephone. Note, although Dr. Killeen's patented answer is,
if anything comes up, and you need to talk, call me.
The part Dr. Killeen left out was,
don't expect a call back.
The same told to Mr. Stengel's older son, and had the same experience, as Dr. Killeen refused to return his call, as well. Okay. Back to the emails fiasco. 3. On October the 25th, 2012, transcript page number 151, to extend the already bogus protective order, which originated from his and his clients' confessed altered evidence trial, on November the 23rd, 2011. Speaking to Mr. Stengel, Mr. Carney, who intentionally causes the problem, to knowingly manufacture fraud bills, and here, as an officer of the court states,
well, she also said that the bills were going to be about $13,000 to $17,000.
And why did she,
Not $50,000.
in response to questioning by Mr. Lazaro, why did she say her bills were as high as they were?
Well, actually, I went, why did she say it? Because
Yes.
of all the emails.
The 480 emails of yours that she had to
No, she
review.
did 480 emails, mine. I actually have a whole spreadsheet, and you're going to be very surprised to find out why those bills are $50,000. And they're not from me. I actually have a whole spreadsheet, and you're going to be very surprised to find out why those bills are $50,000. And they're not from me. And they're not from me. And they're not from me. And they're not from me.
Besides Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney, knowingly committing an insane and unconscionable amount of crimes against the courts, with foreknowledge and malice, even as he professes to be an officer of the court, forwards Dr. Catherine Killeen's insane and unconscionable amount of crimes against the courts, with foreknowledge and malice, such that her $50,000 of fraud bills were attributed to Mr. Stengel's emails. They still have one small problem.
What problem is that?
Can we get a drum roll?
We are ready, when you are.
Okay. Surely you remember the spread the fraud sheets bills, an accounting of all of their bills, line by line, and side by side. And towards the end of that 130-page piece of artwork, contains the spreadsheet calculations, using Dr. Catherine Killeen's own bills. Well, the $50,000 attributed to Mr. Stengel's over 400 emails, is not exactly accurate. Surprise! And not, because we already know, they were not Mr. Stengel's emails. Are you ready with the drum roll?
Does it have to be drums, or can it be something with a similar effect?
I leave it up to you.
Okay. Then we are ready.
The total amount documented in Dr. Catherine Killeen's own bills, when calculating all of her line items, from all emails, from everyone, comes to $4,100 total.
I believe we lost Mr. Carney.
Nah, he's just playing the victim. Let's continue, because 4. On May the 6th, 2013, Mr. Berg responds to Mr. Stengel's motion to remove him as best interest attorney. Although Mr. Stengel hadn't paid Mr. Leon W. Berg for nearly 2 years, due to his obvious fraudulent actions and abuses to his children, Mr. Berg refused to leave the case, keeping his actions alienated from anyone else stepping into his fraud role, and uncover his child predatory actions and abuses on his minor clients and entire communities. Mr. Berg states,
including multiple audio and audiovisual files provided by Mr. Stengel, 2 DVDs prepared by Mr. Stengel, over 400 emails, T28, and a website created by Mr. Stengel.
Note: allegations equals confessions. However, for this specific purpose, he states that
over 400 emails.
In the context of Mr. Stengel's doing. Note: the noting of reviewing Mr. Stengel's interrogatories, we will deal with that confession at a later time. 5. On July the 22nd, 2013, comes Mr. Berg's 50-page response to a complaint filed against him with the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland. Mr. Berg's response contained an insane amount of perjurious falsities, which he was well aware were false, therefore doing so with foreknowledge and malice. Identical to his response to remove him as best interest attorney, this, 2.5 months later, states,
including multiple audio and audiovisual files provided by Mr. Stengel, 2 DVDs prepared by Mr. Stengel, over 400 emails, T28, and a website created by Mr. Stengel.
Important common thread. Notice Mr. Berg doesn't defend his actions or answer the questions, rather continues falsely disparaging his minor client's father, Mr. Stengel, as they all collectively redirect focus. The ones Mr. Berg does answer, like all of Mr. Berg's actions, obviously come from someone who does not possess a conscience. An unconscionable. And, always remember. 6. On July the 22nd, 2013, page number 48 of 50, in Mr. Berg's response to the commission, notes as number 5b, he writes,
I forwarded all of the information, which he provided to me, to Dr. Killeen, though typically, he would provide her with a duplicate copy.
Note: on top of Miss Silisky knowingly bombing everyone with emails, along with Miss Silisky and Mr. Carney, conning, harassing and abusing others to do the same, in order to abuse her own children. Now, 2.5 years after their fraud began, Mr. Berg, for the first time, mentions he did his part. Quietly. Like the street rat that he is, late at night. Mr. Berg confessing to bombarding Dr. Killeen with what he confesses he was already aware was provided to her. Dr. Catherine Killeen, obviously aware she already has the information, happily accepts the duplicates, time and time again, from Mr. Leon W. Berg. The question that remains is rather a simple one. Who else will join this fraud circus? Mr. Leon W. Berg. He looks so happy, yet so evil. Besides, his responses are contradictive. Mr. Berg confesses 2.5 years after Mr. Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen started billing. Yet still, no stand-up confession. Not in court, to the children, schools, police and police departments, hundreds of families and the public. They have knowingly, intentionally, with foreknowledge violated, in order to continue, to knowingly violate and abuse, for profits. 7. On Decision Day, September the 18th, 2013, page number 31, Judge Judith Enza, who has all of the emails, including the one sent to Mr. Lazaro and Mr. Berg, exposing their scams, states, Note, this corrupt and psychotic Judge is justifying her comment, with an eye on who is driving this litigation. The reason the decision took her 9 months, when all the answers were obvious. The back door. However, let's listen to the entire page, as it's chock full of psychosis. Although we are looking at who is responsible for it all, and specifically in this out-of-timeline insight, this page needs a little information in advance. What you will hear in this one page, besides the knowingly false bullshit emails statement is, 1. Dr. Killeen is not in the courtroom, therefore, Judge Enza is representing her. Note, why? Because Judge Enza knew full well, Dr. Killeen's testimony on December the 1st, 2011, was complete bullshit, and colluded perjury, and suborned perjury by Mr. Leon W. Berg. 2. Judge Judith Enza is justifying Dr. Catherine Killeen's bills. 3. Enza, forcing fraud and extortion bills be paid, before cross-examining Dr. Killeen. Note, in fact, Judge Enza later said, Judge Enza demands to hear from Dr. Killeen, in order to consider modification of custody. Translated, Mr. Stengel must pay Dr. Killeen's fraudulent bills first, even though Dr. Killeen herself never officially said that, rather her crime ring member, Judge Judith Enza did, as you will hear. 4. Therefore, cock-blocking Mr. Stengel, and screwing his children in the process. It gets better. Remember, there is always more. After all, there are several thousands of puzzle pieces, connecting intentional fraud and deceit, in so many ways. So, we will quickly add just 2. 5. Miss Silisky borrowed $10,000 from Mr. Stengel, on November the 9th, 2009. The memo line notes, loan, and, to the estate of Gordon Silisky. You may remember Mr. Karsiski's 148-page package to the state of Maryland, where he was very clear in that he was providing only some samples of Miss Silisky's crimes. So, the top of this next page may look familiar. In yet another fraud upon the court, this time the Registry of Wills and the Orphans Court in Annapolis, Maryland. Although there are numerous fraudulent actions by Miss Silisky's illegal actions, she also illegally closed her father's estate, so, here is just one. Miss Silisky does not add Mr. Stengel to the estate as a debtor, and to the list of interested persons, for the $10,000, and a full year later, on November the 18th, 2010, adding another intentional illegal action, and, for one of many other illegal reasons, illegally closes the estate. Although the memo line clearly states, loan, Miss Silisky testified, she didn't think she had to pay it back. Translated, confessing to yet another pre-planned scam, and more fraud. However, Enza, quite upset, tells Miss Silisky she will pay the $10,000 back, and Miss Silisky, on the stand, agrees. Got all of that? Good. Now, back to Judge Enza representing Dr. Killeen, who has not been heard or seen from since December the 1st, 2011. However, at the end of April 2012, and on May the 1st, 2012, where her fraud bills clearly noted collusion and conspiracy with Mr. Berg, Mr. Carney, and Mr. Lazaro, as noted in all of their bills, since she, Dr. Killeen, was scheduled to be cross-examined the following day, May the 2nd, 2012 and May the 3rd, 2012. Which obviously was never going to happen. Hell no. All detailed in other presentations. However, that $10,000 Miss Silisky borrowed, and agreed to pay back, well, Judge Judith Enza refused to put that to a judgment. Therefore, preventing Mr. Stengel's ability to collect. Why? Very simple. Making paying Dr. Killeen a bigger problem. Yes, there is more. And there will be plenty more, after we are done. 6. A while later, Mr. Stengel sent Dr. Killeen a letter, asking how much she is claiming is owed, and what would it take for her to come in and be cross-examined, or questioned. Dr. Catherine Killeen never responded to the letter. Surprise! 7. Judge this Judicienza with the ethics clause of the century. 8. And finally, we will be finishing with reality. Number 7.
By going with this clean hands doctrine, and believe me, one of the things that we want to do, hopefully, is to cross-examine Dr. Colleen on these, on her testimony, since that never happened. Sure.
You won't pay her. She doesn't work for free. She's apparently not in the Berg School of Ethics. I don't know what to tell you.
Dr. Colleen estimated on, and you just touched on this, in her contract that roughly should cost between $10,000 to $13,000. Mr. Stengel's paid twice that. I mean, a considerable sum of money.
Senator, what, 400?
She's alleged.
You can't fuel it and then not pay for it.
That's alleged. I haven't seen any documentation of it. Mr. Stengel will tell you that he said.
Defense number 36, is it? Joe, go get that binder off my couch, please. Not the one that has, there's one that has subpoenas and there's one that has emails.
Okay, but Mr. Stengel's contention is that he only sent 84 emails. Maybe there's some that are related. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it.
What happened to Joe?
Joe got lost.
How did Joe get lost?
Joe was sent on a mission. An impossible mission. Rumor has it, Joe initially went looking for a binder that had 400 emails from Mr. Stengel to Dr. Catherine Killeen. He couldn't find one. So Joe then began looking for a binder that had 400 emails from Mr. Stengel to any and or all people.
So what happened to Joe?
Rumor has it, after quite some time, possibly days, food and medical supplies were sent in to Joe.
What happened to Joe?
What happened to Joe?
What happened to Joe? What happened to Joe?
So then what happened to Joe?
The same thing that happens to everyone that is faced with reality regarding this case. As the story goes, there was a binder. This binder had lots of emails. Take a look at the binder. It's about 3 inches thick. If we look at the other side, we see it sectioned, with 64 tabs. Although there are many numbered beyond number 64. Go figure. Let's have a look inside, shall we? We have an email from Betsy R. Stryker to Bradford Carney, dated January the 27th, 2011. As you can see, uprooting the children, falsely testifying and whatever else, was not enough. No problem, the timeline awaits, as we will destroy this letter with reality in episode number 12. What else do we find? Surely you remember Deneen Gallant-Norring's letter/email. The school principal in Canada. We already took care of her. Let's see just a couple more. Another email to Mr. Carney from Stuart Zolotoro, the photographer, dated January the 26th, 2011. He has his own presentation, coming up in episode number 12, as well. You may note the exhibit number 89. That exceeds the number of tabs. Apparently, Mr. Carney didn't provide everything he had during discovery. He maybe felt this was the good stuff. However, like everything else, nothing matches. Surely you remember Sarah Blattner. Her blasted email while Miss Silisky was conning the hospital during her supposed psych evaluation. Apparently, on July the 2nd, 2011, she sent yet another very long email to Mr. Carney. You may note at the top she begins, "I am a close friend of Susie's." Before, she was her best friend. Apparently, she has been demoted. This one is also loaded with more personal knowledge statements, such as misspelling Mr. Stengel's first name. She also states, with absolute certainty, from Oregon, Mr. Stengel demanded to be let through the gate at Susie's apartment. Here is another one from personal knowledge. This guy's a time bomb. Danger, danger. And a favorite, I read about women like Susie in the newspaper. Who knew prisons had newspapers? At least you get to read about people like Sarah Blattner, right here, with all the other victims. Besides, we never did hear from Joe. I wonder why. And always remember, there is always more. Keep in mind, Mr. Stengel physically provided this information to Judge Senza as well. Besides, 10 months before, the September 18, 2013 bullshit you just heard from Judge Senza, comes the rewind, and the transcript from November 30, 2012, pages 137 to 138, where this very conversation took place. Watch and listen. Number 8.
And they're not short, and we're not disputing that. There was also the 400 emails or so that Dr. Colleen had to review, which obviously increased her fees. It bears noting that only 84 of those emails came from Mr. Stengel. I can't speak to the other 316.
Well, if you know that only 84 came from Mr. Stengel, I mean, how do you know that?
I was informed by Mr. Stengel, actually.
Okay,
It says counted
they
them.
only said 84.
Only said 84. Maybe some came from third parties. I can't speak to the other 316, like I said. Oh, I can speak for Mr. Stengel.
Right.
Important to note, this was the last day of trial. It clarifies the reason it took Judge Senza not only more than the 60 days allotted for a judge to make a ruling, but almost 10 months. She needed to reverse engineer reality. And, as you can already see, Mr. Stengel provided mountains of reality. In fact, she reverse engineered her own comments regarding the 84 emails.
Informed by Mr. Stengel, actually.
Okay,
It says counted
they
them.
only said 84.
Only said 84. Maybe some came from third parties. I can't speak to the other 316, like I said. Oh, I can speak for Mr. Stengel.
Right.
And finally, but not really, because there is more on the emails bullshit. Like Miss Silisky swearing in court, Mr. Stengel sent the 480 emails, and there is always more. However, 9 snapshots of Mr. Stengel's sent folder for Dr. Colleen. Page number 1. They all hate evidence. Snapshots of Mr. Stengel's sent folder for Dr. Colleen. Page number 2. Go figure. Look, 84 emails. Besides, Mr. Stengel provided this corrupt judge with this very information, long before her knowingly false statement we just heard. Kapow. No. Not worth a kapow. Then what? And always remember. So, what happened right after the 38 emails sent by Miss Silisky? Yet more emails. Anyone want to guess who they are from? Billed 0.40 hours for $150.
I went through the bills. I went through them line by line. I studied the descriptions of the work performed, and I considered the rates charged. Part of that review, frankly, was with an eye to determining who was actually driving the litigation. And of course, for that, I only have the pleadings filed and the descriptions delineated in the bills themselves. I do find the hourly rates charged to be fair. I find the time allotted for the tasks performed reasonable. I find that of the almost $200,000 in legal bills, much is attributable to inappropriate actions on the part of Mr. Stengel.
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers?
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers?
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers?
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers?
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers?
How do they all come up with the same wrong answers? Time and time again. And again and again.
That's just one of the multi-billion-dollar questions. What happened between Enza saying I understand on November the 30th, 2012, which was the last day of trial, and September the 18th, 2013, decision day? 1. Judicial rules state, a judge has only 60 days to render a decision. 1a. That would be January the 30th, 2014. 1b. These types don't follow rules. 2. As seen, Mr. Berg was responding on May the 6th, 2013. To a motion filed, obviously, prior to that date. 3. That motion filed by Mr. Stengel, to remove Mr. Leon W. Berg, as best interest attorney. 4. Mr. Berg was not getting paid, yet refused to leave. 5. Judge this Judicenza held on to that motion, not setting a date to be heard. 6. Judge this Judicenza hears it 4.5 months later, on September the 18th, 2013. Decision day. 6a. Note, that would be like you wanting to return something damaged, and the company says, no problem, but bring it back on this specific date. 6b. You arrive, and are told, the warranty expired yesterday. 6c. The filing is to remove Mr. Berg. Enza holds the decision, until it really doesn't matter. 6d. For some sprinkles on this fraud cake, Enza rules in Mr. Berg's favor. 6e. And the not getting paid part, Enza called it, the Berg School of Ethics. 6f. Which apparently, is the same school Enza frequents. 6g. Enza also stated, with the children's mother, father, brother, aunts, uncle, cousins, in the courtroom, Mr. Berg has shown more concern about these kids, than anyone in this room. 6h. Besides it being a violent comment, and psychotic. 6i. How could she possibly know that? Did she ever even speak with the kids? Speak with anyone in the room, loaded with relatives? 6j. This is a rampant, repeating action, all these extremely high-level psychotic unconscionables do. 6k. They are their own witnesses, to what's not even possible. 6l. Rinse and repeat. 6m. Psychosis, on steroids. 6n. Therefore, if you add up Mr. Berg working and not being paid, with the Berg School of Ethics, and as more concern than anyone, leaves the question. So why does he want the money? 6o. Add to that, why does he go to such great lengths to obtain his fraudulent money? 7. So, what changed between the final day of trial, November the 30th, 2012, and September the 18th, 2013? 8. The answer is more than obvious. 9. After several months of Enza not responding with a decision, then, ignoring Mr. Stengel's motion for Mr. Berg's removal, Mr. Stengel filed a complaint with the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland against Mr. Leon W. Berg. He figured, let them be aware and informed of all of these crimes. That included the commission acting as a data bank for holding criminal actions, meticulously documented. In other words, tagging the criminal as a criminal in official records. 10. How are we doing, team fraud? 11. As Mr. Stengel continued doing with them all. 12. Tag 'em. 13. Next criminal. 14. Tag 'em. 15. Next criminal. 16. Tag 'em. 17. Note, get the system? Good. 18. Which criminal wants to play tagged? You're tagged.
I think you should think long and hard before you say a gentleman who has probably shown more concern for these children than anyone else in this room. She's apparently not in the Berg School of Ethics. She's apparently not in the Berg School of Ethics.
On page number 42, Judge this Judicenza again represents Leon W. Berg. In fact, Judge this Judicenza represents everyone against Mr. Stengel, due to him exposing her crime ring, which she so kindly, continually confirms and reconfirms. As you will hear, her anger is not because Mr. Rudo's best interest attorney removal filing was not well written. Rather the complete opposite. We will enhance the volume so you can hear Mr. Stengel continually repeating, say yes.
Oh, but really? Do you believe for 1 second that Mr. Berg cares more about money than these children? Yes. I mean, really? That was not well written.
Yes. Well, Your Honor, Your Honor, it's based on the substantial justification for the statement is based on the motion that Mr. Berg filed to strike the complaint where nothing's mentioned about the allegations made regarding the material change in circumstances and the best interest of the children.
Enza did not like that answer. Therefore, more bullying is needed.
Do you believe, Mr. Rudo, for 1 second, that Mr. Berg cares more about money than these children?
I believe that he cares, that his primary concern, according to his motions, was that Dr. Clean gets paid.
Again, Enza did not like that answer. Therefore, more bullying is needed.
Do you believe for 1 second that Mr. Berg cares more about money than he does Alex and Mike?
Do you believe you are going to get away with all of your crime rings meticulously documented years of crimes against children, schools and society?
Also, in closing,
Mr. Berg, Mr. Leon W. Berg, come out wherever you are.
You screwed with the wrong dad.
You screwed with the wrong dad.
How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth?
Can't wait till you end up in prison.
Witnesses. 1. Alexander Stengel. 2. Maya Stengel. Witnesses. 1. Alexander Stengel. 2. Maya Stengel. Witnesses. 1. Alexander Stengel. 2. Maya Stengel. Witnesses. 1. Alexander Stengel. 2. Maya Stengel.
Alison Meister Friedman, hoodwinked, conned, and played like a fool, to wrongfully involve as many as possible in Happy Halloween at the Meisters and the Boys Latin School, Fall Fist, staged scams, and perjury. Lots of perjury. Alison Meister Friedman, aka manufactured witness/perjurer, swears under oath on the penalty of perjury that Mr. Stengel came over to her home during Halloween, unannounced. They failed to tell her Miss Silisky Stengel actually invited Mr. Stengel in an email just 2 hours earlier, which Mr. Stengel had. Therefore, Miss Silisky setting up yet another staged event. That time using the children's Halloween as the background and the Friedman family as tools.
Yeah, I've been around him before. The Halloween before, his son Alex and my son are very close friends, and they had come. Alex had come trick or treating at my house the Halloween before, and Alex was with his mother that night, and Mark came to our house unannounced, even though it was Susie's night.
Email from Miss Silisky Stengel, Sunday, October the 31st, 2010, at 3:09 p.m., to Mr. Stengel. Subject, Halloween.
Would you like to meet at 5 p.m. at Meister's to trick or treat?
Note 1. This, the day after Miss Silisky, with the assistance of Betsy and David R. Stryker, in uprooting the children on their father's birthday. 2. In fact, the very email states,
Maya has been asking to come home.
Therefore, Miss Silisky not only conned Betsy and David R. Stryker the day before, but is now conning, abusing, and involving the Friedmans in her psychotic staged Halloween event. It's clear Maya, 8 years old, is being held against her will, by her mother, and her liberties being restrained. The same thing happened in December, where Alex and Maya were held prisoners at Kelly and Andy Weinberg's compound, where Alex called his father very early one morning to help him escape what he later called, and noted in his audio journal as, prison. The escape was successful, as Kelly Weinberg herself, outside with her dog, looked on. Kelly, in the psychology field herself, had no idea who she was housing and assisting. Unable to recognize psychosis, which is the same problem most in that very field have. Even the experts themselves are taken in by these types, as that too is well documented in their own industry, where the psychotic Bradford Carney, later in court stated, Mr. Stengel lured Alex away in his pajamas at 10 p.m. That counts as only one of the over 2,000 documented known fraudulent statements made by these thugs. After Alex's escape, Maya continued to be held prisoner. Kelly and Andy Weinberg are the very people that introduced Miss Silisky to the extremely high-level psychotic, Mr. Bradford G. Y. Carney, creating a psychotic stew. The Weinberg's course of action never changed, even after having witnessed the escape herself, therefore forcing the complete and guaranteed destruction of Alex and Maya's childhoods, from which they may never recover. All this provided to the so-called experts, as well, who not only assisted in all the abuses to everyone, rather insisted. 3. How programmed and deluded was Alison Meister Friedman, with her statement.
Even though it was Susie's night,
We will now take an overhead look to better understand the circumstances surrounding Alison Meister Friedman's many sworn perjurious statements on November the 23rd, 2011. We will provide some history, only a couple, as the actions prior span 4 years. October the 31st, 2010, Halloween at the Meister's neighborhood. Just 1 day earlier, on October the 30th, 2010, and the children's father's birthday, Miss Silisky hoodwinks and cons Betsy R. Stryker, David R. Stryker, who is a T. Rowe Price top executive, Eileen Rosenberg-Shear, and others, to assist in uprooting the minor children. Just 11 hours before uprooting the children on October the 30th, 2010, Miss Silisky, on October the 29th, 2010, at 10:45 p.m., confirms Mr. Stengel wants a divorce.
Your father and I are definitely divorcing. And he just told me tonight. Your father and I are definitely divorcing. And he just told me tonight.
We now start from the children being uprooted and held against their will. October the 31st, 2010, Halloween at the Meister's neighborhood. On November the 29th, 2010, Miss Silisky files her first fraudulent protective order. 8 days later, on December the 7th, 2010, where Miss Silisky must prove her allegations filed 8 days earlier, Kelly Weinberg, Betsy R. Stryker, Sally Silisky and others testify against the children, Alex and Maya. Ms. Silisky loses the case. After losing the trial, Miss Silisky, in such fear for her life, as sworn to, in front of Judge Jan Alexander, comes back to the family home, only with her 80-year-old mother, to cause more chaos. Mr. Stengel had to yet again call the police for assistance. Towards the end, comes this.
Going anywhere.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No,
Who says
not
they are
have to go.
absolutely, you're going with me to Kelly Weinberg. You are.
No,
You're not staying with your father who's doped up on morphine, who's not doing it.
Look at me.
You're here on my hand. Maya, what happened?
You kept fooling me.
We're leaving.
Huh? No!
Kelly Weinberg, let's go. Yes, we are. We're going to Kelly Weinberg, let's go.
Yay!
Come on.
Please, just stop. Yeah, stop grilling her.
Where do you want to go?
I'm going to Kelly Weinberg.
Let's go.
All right. Sir, where do you want to go?
Stay here.
Okay, we'll stay here. Let's go.
Alex had not seen or spoken to his father in 8 days. This is just a tiny bit more information for now. Ms. Silisky said to Alex, "Okay, you stay here." However, the next day, December the 8th, 2010, Ms. Silisky called Child Protective Services to have Alex rescued from a drug-addicted violent man. Child Protective Services declined Ms. Silisky's fraudulent attempt. Ms. Silisky then took matters into her own hands and hijacked Alex from the carpool stop before the family home. Alex was taken to the Weinberg compound and held captive against his will with Maya. Kelly Weinberg and Andy Weinberg introduced Miss Silisky to Bradford G. Y. Carney from Royston, Mueller, McLean and Reed, LLP. Agreement is signed. After being held prisoner for several days, Alex escapes the Weinberg compound very early in the AM. Alex calls his father to help him escape what Alex, 10 years old, called prison. Maya was still being held against her will. Mr. Carney gets right to work, sending letters stating Mr. Stengel is mentally ill and needs to be evaluated, otherwise Maya is at risk. No kidding. From the king of psychosis, representing the queen of psychosis. In order to free Maya from the grips of evil, Mr. Stengel is forced to file for a divorce on December the 21st, 2010. The following day.
In the Circuit Court for Baltimore County. Consent Order, page number 1. It is this 22nd day of December, 2010. 3. Ordered that the parties shall share access of the minor children, such that defendant shall have the children every Monday after school, through Wednesday morning, and alternating Fridays after school, through Monday morning. Plaintiff shall have the children every Wednesday after school, through Friday morning, and alternating Fridays after school, through Monday morning.
Even though it was Susie's night.
Note that agreement was nearly 2 months after Halloween, therefore, Alison Meister Friedman was simply reduced to a perjurious, drone, repeating nonsense, provided to her from extremely psychotic and evil people. It's more than obvious, Alison Meister Friedman's sworn testimony was clearly false.
Even though it was Susie's night. Even though it was Susie's night.
Miss Zaleski's staged event, one of dozens, was nearly 2 months prior to the actual consent order, which defined which parent had the children, and on what days. Nearly 11 months to the day, and on November the 23rd, 2011, Alison Meister Friedman swears under oath and the penalty of perjury. Just a month before her perjury, Alison Meister Friedman was instrumental in wrongfully involving Boyce Latin School of Maryland. Miss Zaleski, in cooperation with Bradford G. Carney, a Boyce Latin alumni, staged yet another event. This time, using the school's annual Fall Fest event as their background, and Maya as the pawn in their psychotic games. Christopher Post, headmaster of Boyce Latin School of Maryland, was hoodwinked, conned, and played like a fool. Unlike Garrison Forest School, who documented years of Miss Zaleski's psychotic and abusive behavior, was not buying any of it from any of them, as Miss Zaleski was bombarding the school to act swiftly against their 8-year-old student's father, who they have had no problem with whatsoever over the same years. In fact, Garrison Forest School asked Mr. Stengel to coach their school's girls' basketball team, as noted in the November 5, 2010 email, where it states,
"Hi Mark, we'd love to have you as our 3rd/4th grade coach."
Maya and her schoolmates were very excited. Apparently, Mr. Stengel was not the problem. That was just weeks before Miss Zaleski's first fraudulent protective order on November the 29th, 2010. And now, by court order, Mr. Stengel was not even permitted on either of the children's school's grounds, let alone coach the school's team. Maya, very upset, was then told by her mother it was the principal's doing. Really? Obviously, and as always, Miss Zaleski's psychotic actions have far-reaching ramifications. None which would be permitted by a conscience. On the other end, we have dozens of pages of Garrison Forest School internal memos, which the so-called experts refuse to provide. Garrison Forest School internal memo. Just one part of just one memo.
The bigger issue is Susie. She baits Maya. She eggs it all on.
Each of their memos are loaded. Here is one more, below.
But I think Mom doesn't like her being in the low groups, and is making a huge deal in front of Maya, and is making her feel inadequate.
Here you got a 70, which is basically failing, okay? Here you got a 70, which is basically failing, okay?
That, along with their school being harassed by 3 attorneys, including Mr. Leon W. Berg, the fraudulent best interest attorney, and Bradford G. Carney, it was more than obvious they were not acting in the best interest of their student. In fact, it was more than obvious they were not acting in the best interest of any child, of any age, period. The Leaches turned their sights on Boyce Latin School of Maryland, their headmaster, Christopher Post, their counselor, teachers, staff, and anyone they could get their claws into. such as parents, like Alison Meister Friedman. Note, Garrison Forest School, in a written document, told Miss Silisky they will not be involved. Unbeknown to the school, Miss Silisky and Bradford G. Y. Carney, in cooperation with Leon W. Berg, used the school's name anyway, on multiple occasions, to advance their agenda, to the detriment of the children. Bradford G. Y. Carney, a Boyce Latin School alumni, holds the title, the King of Suborning Perjury. Leon W. Berg, the alleged best interest attorney, had been involved from very early on. Mr. Leon W. Berg did not interrupt the flow of fraud, rather contributed to the fraud and abuses against his minor clients and anyone who dared to get in his evil path. Dr. Catherine Killeen, aka Dr. Fraudleen, was instrumental as well, especially in hoodwinking, conning, abusing, and playing Boyce Latin School as fools. Their teachers, counselor, staff, and administration. Dr. Killeen also possesses no conscience, making her psychotic actions and abuses affecting so many as easy as taking a drink of water. This psychotic psychologist, like the rest of this crime ring, is, and are, very dangerous. Their collective evil acts, against hundreds, is nothing short of Nazi-like, cult-like, Hitler-esque. What say you, Dr. Fraudleen, who refuses to be cross-examined on her 100, give or take a few, intentional, fraudulent sworn expert testimony, on December the 1st, 2011. Just 1 week after this authored evidence trial scam, where Alison Meister Friedman falsely testifies, further destroying the children's lives. Dr. Killeen and Leon W. Berg finished their designed agenda on December the 1st, 2011, both received all of this. Besides, Mr. Leon W. Berg and Dr. Catherine Killeen were obtained via the very same consent order of December the 22nd, 2010, where Alison Meister Friedman's sworn testimony and the truthfulness of it is not even possible, as just seen. What say you, Mr. Leon W. Berg? Although Alison Meister Friedman's sworn testimony regarding Halloween, where she swears she is so fearful of Mr. Stengel, who is a dangerous man, has yet another problem with her sworn testimony. From Alison at Comcast.net. Sent, Wednesday, December the 15th, 2010, at 2:02 p.m. To marklapp@stingles.com. CC, Andy Meister.
Subject, regarding carpool. I gave it to Josh to give to Alex. Since it only goes through year end, we need to make up a new one. I will speak with Andy about creating a new one, for the rest of the year for everyone.
Alison Meister Friedman's email to Mr. Stengel regarding the carpool schedule was dated December the 15th, 2010. That very email is 6 weeks after that Halloween. Alison Meister Friedman continued for nearly 15 minutes, however, we will look at just a couple for now.
First he was like following us in the car, and then he had, it was just, he just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
Note, let's break those two perjurious statements apart. 1.
First he was like following us in the car. And
really? Because it was Halloween, and Mr. Stengel arrived in the neighborhood, then went looking for his children, to meet up with them. However, Alison Meister Friedman, used as a patsy, a prop, a stagehand, was likely told when Mr. Stengel arrived.
What is he doing here?
Do we have this right, Alison Meister Friedman?
Ms. Friedman, are you aware that Ms. Stengel had sent Mr. Stengel an email requesting that he come over that Halloween night? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Let's move on to more complete bullshit. Number 2.
He just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
Really? Yet, Alison allows Mr. Stengel to take her son golfing. Better yet, Mr. Stengel has been driving her son in carpool for several years, even days before that Halloween. And if that wasn't enough confirmation of hoodwinking, conning, brainwashing, and playing Alison Meister Friedman as a fool, even after that Halloween, Alison Meister Friedman was handling the carpool schedule, which included Mr. Stengel.
He just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
That clearly shows Alison Meister Friedman's sworn testimony is false. Furthermore, after the kids were done trick-or-treating, Mr. Stengel was invited into the Friedmans' home. Alex slept at the Friedmans that Halloween night. Mr. Stengel picked Alex up the next morning at the Friedmans to take Alex to his orthodontist appointment. In fact, while Alex was getting ready, Alison invited Mr. Stengel into her home again. Alison and Mr. Stengel were chatting for about 10 minutes or so, until Alex was ready to go. Again, we have reality versus psychological warfare, disturbingly violated and brainwashed people repeating complete nonsense, which opposes their own experiences. Besides, like the others, Alison or John Friedman and Mr. Stengel never once had any issue with each other. Ever. Therefore, Alison is not swearing under oath to personal knowledge. So, where did Alison Meister Friedman obtain her newfound fears and opinions?
He just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
Told Teresa that you're trying to salvage your family. Yeah. See, I have friends that tell me what you said. That's funny, and Trish too.
And what did you think that?
Trish thought you were on drugs when you were talking to her. She's like, is he medicated? What the hell's wrong with him?
Really?
Like, I don't know. Maybe he was medicated. Yeah, pick who you're talking to, Mark. You think they're your friends. You talk to her twice in your life.
I think they're your friends.
They're not your friends. They're not going to advocate for you. They're not even going to go to bat for you. They think you're psychic. They think you're crazy. Okay? They know you're crazy. They've been listening to the stories that I've been telling them. They know you're not. So Mark, there's proof evidence. Okay? I have nothing to worry about. You're the one who needs to think about it. Okay.
He just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
First Amendment rights to be informed she is being conned have been removed. Hoodwinked. Conned. Played like a fool. Fraud upon all veterans and their families.
They think you're psychic. They think you're crazy. Okay? They know you're crazy. They've been listening to the stories that I've been telling them. They know you're not. They think you're psychic. They think you're crazy. Okay? They know you're crazy. They've been listening to the stories that I've been telling them. They know you're not.
He just always makes me feel uncomfortable.
Danger. 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 About a year later, comes Alison Meister Friedman's sworn, perjurious testimony, at the altered evidence trial, on November the 23rd, 2011, where Alison Meister Friedman swore under oath, and the penalty of perjury, against the children's best interest, where Alex and Maya lost all but 1.5 days every 2 weeks with their father, their only safe place of sanity. Just 1 week later, on December the 1st, 2011, as detailed in the Letter from a Psychopath presentation, and in other presentations, where the crime ring put forward their collusion and conspiracy, they have been working on, for nearly a year. Afterwards, Alex and Maya lost all, 100% communications with their father. The only person on this planet, they both know they can trust, count on, and will never give up on them. Enjoy this sampling of Mr. Stengel's research, where the effects of being victimized by psychological warfare, waged upon you, your children, or entire communities, are meticulously documented, for this, and future generations. You decide. Meanwhile, what will Alison Meister Friedman do, after being made aware? Sit silent, thereby allowing others, to be victimized by these same predators? Surely Alison Meister Friedman is aware, at this moment in time, Alison must provide a lifelong lesson for her own children. Note, this presentation, in its entirety, is only a sampling of the Alison Meister Friedman collection. We now go back to the study and effects on psychological warfare, and you decide.
As I've shared, I really am not happy being in the middle of this, situation. Alex was with his mother that night, and Mark came to our house unannounced, even though it was Susie's night. First he was following us in the car, and he just always makes me feel uncomfortable. And as I've shared, I really am not happy being in the middle of this, situation.
That statement, made from the witness chair, in a live trial, where Alison Meister Friedman falsely swore under oath, to things which are not even possible. In reality, the middle, is light years away, from where she is. Testifying, against the children, and their father, is not considered middle ground. That statement is one of many, which go to the onslaught of systematic, and organized brainwashing, and its obvious results, showing the level of delusion Alison would, and has required, to even consider her actions are in any way in line with being in the middle. Obviously, the psychotic team of Miss Sileski and the evil Bradford G.Y. Carney had her so deluded, this just 4 weeks after Miss Sileski set up the staged event, using the Boys Latin School Fall Fest annual event. Mr. Stengel and the children, after the November 23, 2011 trial, went from 50-50 to only 1.5 days with sanity every 2 weeks. That was also known as the altered evidence trial, where 6 months later, on April 12, 2012, Miss Sileski confessed to altering the evidence, in cooperation with Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney. Just 1 week after Alison's perjurious testimony, and on December 1, 2011, was the custody trial, where they all colluded and conspired against Mr. Stengel, his children, and hoodwinked Judge Martin, as Mr. Stengel's alleged attorney, Robert Wayne Lazaro, a.k.a. that mole, bailed out, with bullshit. Mr. Stengel then lost 100% communications with the children, as they did with him, as Dr. Catherine Killeen made a drunken sailor look like Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa look like a drunken sailor. All collusion in all of their own bills leading up to that. As is obvious, they all collectively and with foreknowledge abused everyone in their paths. Everyone. But none more than Christopher Post, headmaster of Boys Latin School of Maryland, who after being bullied and conned by these slugs, banned Mr. Stengel, without ever asking him his side of the story. Alison Meister Friedman, even after being made aware, while on the stand, she was conned, regarding the Halloween, as they set her up like a stuffed animal at a child's party, as they whacked the crap out of her. Alison, so brainwashed and deluded, and now concerned about her own fraudulent testimony, continued, even involving Hana, a women's abuse organization. Therefore, making it easy for these villains to abuse an abuse organization. Alison Meister Friedman also said something ridiculous as well, regarding her witnessing, whatever she thinks she witnessed, stated, she came in the middle. However, if you are not there in the beginning, how would you know where the middle is? The entire thing lasted maybe 2 to 3 minutes. Not enough time to have a beginning, middle and end. After Alison's false testimony on November 23, 2011, which was one of the worst days of Mr. Stengel's life, Alex said, when his mother came back from court, and excitedly told him what had happened, he was so upset, he peed his pants. At a later trial, on October 25, 2012, Alison Meister Friedman also ignored a subpoena provided by Mr. Stengel, and court transcripts have Bradford G.Y. Carney stating he had even spoken to Alison's husband John just before, in regards to Alison's subpoena. There is no doubt Mr. Carney conned John to have Alison not show up to court. However, in court, Mr. Carney mentions the conversation with John Friedman, thereby throwing John Friedman under the bus with his wife, Alison. That can't be good for John Friedman, who is an attorney, and there are no time limits on filings. The reality is, Alex really got it. All of it. On his own. The scams, the cons, the lies. Who disparaged who? Standing next to it his entire life. Once when Alex was 11 years old, he told his father, "Mom cries poor, and gets people to pay for all kinds of things." An 11-year-old, describing his mother as a con artist, by simply describing what he constantly witnesses. Mr. Stengel is not even sure if either of his kids will ever recover from this. Picture someone throwing hand grenades into a school, and Mr. Stengel running in to get them out, and the person that threw them points and says, "See, he did it." All the while playing the victim. Extremely high-level unconscionables will kill your dog, then go help you look for it. Since they are so concerned and helpful. That's not a joke, rather a fact.
I understand I'm going to issue a subpoena for you, albeit after the fact, but you're here as a result of me telling you I'm going to subpoena you to this proceeding. You're not comfortable being here, are you?
No.
And why aren't you comfortable?
Objection.
As I've shared, I really am not happy being in the middle of this, situation.
Therefore, Alison Meister Friedman came to court without requiring a subpoena, just because Mr. Carney asked her. Although Alison Meister Friedman is not happy with being involved, her response is to one of the psychopaths that wrongfully involved her, her family, school, and anyone else they could con this patsy/stooge to do. More important, the confessed fact, Mr. Bradford G. Carney and Miss Siliski conned her to falsely testify, without even providing a subpoena. However, when provided a legal subpoena to appear in court on October the 25th, 2012, Mr. Bradford G. Carney, from Royston, Mueller, McLean and Reed, LLP, confesses at that very October the 25th, 2012 trial, where he spoke with Mr. John Friedman, just before, and lo and behold, Alison Meister Friedman does not show up in court, therefore committing yet another criminal act. Instead, Alison Meister Friedman sends the already warned and corrupt Judge This Judith Cienza a letter that very day, stating Mr. Stengel is harassing her by subpoenaing her. Like everything else, that letter is available as well. Alison Meister Friedman will have many opportunities to clarify all of her actions. On November the 23rd, 2011, Alison Meister Friedman testified to the impossible. 1 week after that altered evidence trial, comes the child custody scam. On December the 1st, 2011, Judge Timothy Martin drew the short straw and was assigned the case just 1 day earlier. However, this crime ring has been conspiring from the beginning against whatever judge the case is assigned to, especially well documented in their own bills leading up to this custody hearing. At this hearing, and in regards to the recent altered evidence trial, and as it relates to Alison Meister Friedman, we will listen to this on page number 114.
That would be great. That makes sense. Leon can speak to the children.
What's the length and breadth of the protective order?
It was a 3-witness case. It was Mrs. Stengel, Mr. Stengel, and Mr. Stengel's son. And it was adopted.
What happened?
The adult son.
The what?
The adult son from his prior marriage.
Scott Stengel.
What happened?
Her petition, she received a temporary protective order from Judge Chester in the district court. We appeared before Judge Ryan a week later for the final protective order hearing. After a 2.5 or 3-hour hearing, he said that she had met her burden by clear and convincing evidence, and he entered a protective order for 1 year, giving her custody of the children and giving him every other weekend visitation.
That's why you're operating under that one. What's the length and breadth of the protective order?
It was a 3-witness case. It was Mrs. Stengel, Mr. Stengel, and Mr. Stengel's son.
Note 1. What they are referring to occurred just 1 week earlier. 2. Mr. Carney apparently has a very short memory. 3. Leaving out Alison Meister Friedman, who they conned to come to court on November the 23rd, 2011, and commit perjury. 4. What you are now witnessing is the alienation of Alison Meister Friedman part 5. In fact, for an October the 25th, 2012 trial, Mr. Stengel subpoenaed Alison Meister Friedman, who ignored the subpoena and did not come to court. Mr. Carney in court said he spoke to Alison Meister Friedman's husband just before, regarding the subpoena. Her husband, John Friedman, is also an attorney. Let's listen to Mr. Bradford G. Carney, the professed officer of the court, states on that very day, October the 25th, 2012.
Related to the divorce case, and there's one in this particular case. There's a woman by the name of Friedman whose husband is a lawyer. Who is spoken with me about their desire to not be here. But if there's a subpoena, there's a subpoena. That he, as a member of the officer of the court, he can't ignore that, obviously.
Dear Judge Norman, allow me to translate what Mr. Carney just professed as an officer of the court. Reality may sound something like this.
Even though I just told the court, I am aware of a subpoena provided to Alison Meister Friedman to be in court on this very day, and I also just advised the court, Mr. Friedman, an attorney himself, is well aware of that fact. I also advised the court, their desire not to be here, and as your honor can clearly see, Alison Meister Friedman is not in court. The fact I told John Friedman, like so many others, no matter what, do not have anyone come to court, and allow Mr. Stengel to question them. Except I worded it a little different. I told them, Mr. Stengel is harassing them, and they should let me handle it for them. And, all of these people, really do appreciate my assistance.
Note, Mr. Carney is well aware, Alison Meister Friedman is not forthcoming today, yet states,
Their desire to not be here, but if there's a subpoena, there's a subpoena. That he, as a member of the officer of the court, he can't ignore that, obviously.
Note, obviously. What's obvious is Mr. Carney's extremes tactic, where he states the complete opposite to reality. Obviously can't ignore it, yet did just that. Ignored it. Now, the Freedman's thrown under the bus with the rest of their victims. What's more obvious is, Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney is not an officer of the court, used to forward more fraud, rather a criminal of the court.
It's pure and simple harassment on the part of Mr. Stengel. He is trying to prevent his wife from earning a living by sending subpoenas to the people that she has worked with as a marketing person over the years.
Note, really, Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney. It wouldn't be that Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney, an officer of his designed kangaroo court, in cooperation with Miss Silisky, filing multiple zero-income statements. How would you suggest Mr. Stengel obtain this information, which Mr. Carney and his client refused to provide? All the while telling the courts, it is Mr. Stengel who was refusing to provide documents. Really. Again, psychosis, working the extremes. On the other end, we have Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney and Miss Silisky telling all of their victims, it is Mr. Stengel, yet again harassing them by requesting documents. Again, psychosis, working the extremes. As if Mr. Stengel wanted to go into the time and expense, let alone involve and bother these people. Apparently, Mr. Carney and Miss Silisky left out the multiple zero-income fraud filings and the over 2,000 counts of documented perjury. Then telling the courts the same bullshit to then quash their victims' First Amendment rights to speak and hear for themselves. Again, psychosis, working the extremes. Among many criminal acts, identity theft is one that comes to mind. Psychological warfare is another. Apparently, they forgot to tell their hundreds of victims they were players in some psychotic game where children are the pawns, and rules for this crime ring don't exist. Each one of these acts would not be permitted by a conscience. Let's take a quick look at that October the 25th, 2012 letter. It's not necessary to pause to read that this time. This will be dissected in the timeline. For now, we are simply pointing out the letter, and just two of many of Mr. Carney's buzzwords. Harass. This word, like many of Mr. Carney's buzzwords, appear in many areas, such as letters, transcripts, and in documents from many different people, where Mr. Carney and Miss Silisky intentionally inserts the buzzword in hopes the con will have them repeat it. Also, often used by many of this crime ring, is the buzzword
incomprehensible.
Really? Incomprehensible? How did she respond to something incomprehensible? Moving on.
Were issued for the purposes of harassment.
Note, really. And
my request for protection from such harassment.
Protection? Really? Sounds very serious, Mr. Carney. I mean Alison Meister Friedman. Wink wink. Their repeated covert actions are targeted. Make no mistake about it. Whether directed at the victim, Mr. Zolotoro, such as Mr. Carney writing,
I'm truly sorry if you are being harassed by Mark Stengel.
Or Mr. Carney's own retainer agreement, where he writes,
and the email harassment that you and your friends have been experiencing.
Really, Mr. Carney? These are provided as some examples. In reality, it's Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney and Miss Silisky harassing these very people in their covert attempt to have them act and proceed like brainwashed drones and repeat it as it's all Mr. Stengel's doing. Then, Mr. Stengel subpoenaed Alison Meister Friedman again for a trial in November 2012. Mr. Carney filed to squash, destroy those subpoenas, which included over a dozen people, a school, 2 police officers, a sheriff, and many others. You will also notice Jean Campbell from Boyce Latin School, the teacher conned to come to the police station, who witnessed the son refusing to go with his mother. Mr. Carney will do whatever, like illegally represent the police, sheriff's department, a school, teachers, etc., as he sees fit. The quashing is further evidence of Mr. Carney and their crime ring's agenda to alienate their prey from being advised they are not really witnesses, rather victims of an extremely high-level psychotic crime ring. And for the icing on this fraud cake, Mr. Carney also now represents Dr. Catherine Killeen as well. Not a chance in hell is Dr. Killeen never getting on any stand to be questioned regarding her sworn false testimony and her corrupt and unethical actions, as you will learn, from before she even began in the case. You heard that right. Dr. Catherine Killeen's fraud began before she decided to take the case, which is also well documented. Who did Dr. Killeen testify she went to Boyce Latin School to speak with? The counsellor, Cheryl Flowers. Surely you remember Mr. Carney and his quashing of the subpoenas, playing representative and legal counsel for, basically whoever they need to alienate, which is everyone. Boyce Latin School has their own legal representation. However, that's not Mr. Carney's, Miss Silisky, or the rest of the crime ring's problem or concern. Here you have Christopher Post, headmaster, and there is Cheryl Flowers, and Jean Campbell. Surely can't have any of them come to court and testify. Jean Campbell would say Alex refused to go with his mother that night during the exchange at the police station. Can't allow that. Hell no. Mr. Bradford G.Y. Carney takes it upon himself to remove their First Amendment rights to speak freely. In this case, known as identity theft. With Fraulein Enzer at the helm on November 26, 2012, tends to her duties as a crime ring member and further alienates the victims. This, after Mr. Stengel advises her, the financial nature she is demanding be the only thing discussed at trial, in just 2 days, November 28th through November 30th, 2012, was in fact financial in nature. These victims were hoodwinked and conned by this group while building a fortress to protect their fraudulent and criminal acts, using these very people against those very people, harassing them to do whatever, which Mr. Carney also gets the fraud bill for. All the while, the taxpayers are footing the bills, plural, for each of these state employees and county, such as police, courts, judges, etc. Next is what is called a titles page. The court transcripts, broken down by action. A snapshot of the directory and the titles given. It will soon be clear. All are tied to one or more actions. This one titles page dated November 26, 2012, happens to be a short set and not completely gone through. Many have multiple actions in the same title. This one is also only the one page, where most have many pages.
Allison Meister Friedman.
Again, Allison Meister Friedman was manipulated to show up in court in front of Judge Ryan to testify to something that she didn't know. She didn't realize she was committing perjury. She's a very nice lady. And again, that created expenses, and that's where I lost my children. And she didn't know that she testified that I came over uninvited and irate. And she didn't know that Susie, just hours before, sent me an email inviting me to come over there. But Susie didn't tell her that in order to get her to come to court to testify. And that's when I lost my children. You understand? So and that was expensive. And that's where I lost my children. And that's where I lost my children. And that's where I lost my children.
Estimated list of gotchas, or the N list. No way outs. November 26, 2012, merits hearing, Enza, 34, 56, partially done, Judge Enza, fraud. At what point should a father stop documenting crimes against his children? Answer, when they're free from intentional delusion and tyranny. Let's do one more, for now. P. Stuart Zolotoro.
All right, Stuart Zolotoro.
Perfect. Stuart Zolotoro was also manipulated, and he had and Susie got him to send a letter to Mr. Carney stating that the video that I sent was altered or something, staged. I'm sorry, he used the word staged. The fact of the matter is, Your Honor, that I sent out a 5-second video of her smashing the kitchen cabinet door into my head, okay? And I sent the 5-minute video out for one reason.
Sorry, in one breath you said 5 seconds, and the next breath you said 5 seconds.
I'm sorry, 5 seconds. It was a 5-second video.
Send it out where?
It was after,
Where did it go?
It went to a bunch of people.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a mistake. I agree. However, it was a mistake. I agree that was right after she had lost the protective order hearing in front of Judge Alexander. Okay, and I was upset because everything she's done has been fabricated.
I'm sorry, what's Stuart going to testify to?
He's going to testify to the fact He wasn't told. I have a letter from Susie that same night that cabinet thing happened, that she admits that she hit me with the cabinet, but she didn't tell Stuart Zellatoro that. She found a professional photographer, manipulated him to think that it was staged, and then had him send a letter to Mr. Carney, which creates more expenses.
As you can clearly see, hoodwinking, conning, and playing them all like fools, ongoingly, requires brainwashing. Enza, who was later warned by the Judicial Disabilities Commission, specifically related to Mr. Stengel's cases, is fully participating in their psychological warfare games against their many victims. Hoodwinking, conning, and playing them all like fools. How else would Bradford G.Y. Carney generate $200,000 of fraud bills, if not by harassing and abusing all of these people and organizations? Judge this Enza. What say you? Bradford G.Y. Carney. What say you? Susan Siliski? What say you? Robert Wayne Lazaro? What say you? Leon W. Berg? What say you? Dr. Catherine Killeen? What say you? Judge this Kathleen Cox. What say you? Take your time. That's only one of the questions each of you will be asked, under oath. A. Christopher Post. B. Sherelle Flowers. C. Jean Campbell. James Parks. From Mount Vernon Realty, Miss Sileski's real estate employer. Mr. Parks evaded service. Then the moron shows up to court, who was then put on the stand and confirmed Miss Sileski's and Bradford G.Y. Carney's multiple zero-income filings were fraud. However, a couple days before that, and when Mr. Stengel brought Mr. Parks up to judge this Enza, including his evading service. B. Sherelle Flowers. D. Dr. Catherine Killeen. F. Jonathan Seville. G. Andy Weinberg. H. Kelly Weinberg. I. Betsy R. Stryker. J. David R. Stryker. K. Catherine Barrison. O. Joe D. Marlowe. Now that Judge this Enza cock-blocks the Siliski Carney victims, removing their First Amendment rights to speak and listen for themselves, and expose how Bradford G.Y. Carney abused everyone to generate fraud bills, comes this.
I have a question for Your Honor, if you don't mind. In relation to Mr. Carney's bills, am I able to ask him questions in regards to his bills? No.
Hell no.
E. Neil Swearen, Southern Trust. However, Mr. Swearen doesn't show up to court. Surprise! After he was called, he had to drop his life and come to court to deal with the designed fraud. When asked on the stand, and under oath, who told him not to come to court, Mr. Swearen said, nobody. Really? Really, Mr. Neil Swearen? Anyway, Mr. Swearen testified he in fact paid Miss Siliski several thousands of dollars. Therefore, confirming yet again, Miss Siliski and Bradford G.Y. Carney's zero-income filings, plural, were fraud. That's 242. Ms. Susan Siliski and Bradford G.Y. Carney are batting 1,000 at the fraud plate. Yet, Mr. Swearen and Mr. Parks both complained Mr. Stengel was harassing them. What will Miss Siliski and Bradford G.Y. Carney do when Mr. Stengel subpoenas all those 100-plus people and organizations provided to the state of Maryland and involved in falsely having Mr. Stengel incarcerated? What will they all do if added to the defendants list as well? In fact, how deluded was Mr. James Parks? Like a good little drone, Mr. Parks went to the county license office to file a complaint against Mr. Stengel regarding a permit for a deck roof, even though Mr. Parks was never at Mr. Stengel's residence. This was done in front of the children. The inspector went to Mr. Stengel's home and approved the work. Again, how deluded is Mr. James Parks? In the hallway, outside the courtroom, Mr. Parks points to Mr. Stengel and says,
"I can't stand this man."
However, Mr. Parks never had so much as any one-on-one conversation with Mr. Stengel, and they met only twice. Once before, while eating lunch with Miss Siliski, and that very day, in the courthouse. Mr. Parks is a good little drone. Can someone give Mr. Parks a biscuit? And sorry, you're all under psychological arrest. How else could Mr. Carney ring up or write down $200,000 of counterfeit orders and fraud bills? Each line item is an intentional criminal act. Each line item is a counterfeit order. And like printing counterfeit money in order to obtain real money, goods or services, so is the instrument used by this crime ring. Each line item is a crime item, a pre-designed fraudulent action, done so with the intent to obtain real money. Unlike those that counterfeit money, this crime ring has many added crimes, such as perjury, suborning perjury, fraud upon the court, and a slew of other crimes. Just like Enza, fully aware of these crimes, each one of Judge Justice's fraudulent judgments is a counterfeit order and an intentional criminal act. Bounty hunters? Heck. We deliver the criminals to the front steps of justice. They appear to be too busy with the black kid, with the 2 marijuana joints. That kid is going to jail. Right, Judge Judice Enza? Right, Judge Kathleen G. Cox? Right, Scott D. Schellenberger?
West's Annotated Code of Maryland. Criminal Law. Title 8. Fraud and Related Crimes. Subtitle 6. Counterfeiting and Related Crimes. Counterfeiting of orders for money or goods. Order for money or goods defined. A. In this section, order for money or goods means any writing, ordering, or requesting for the payment of money or the delivery of goods. Prohibited. B. A person may not 1. With intent to defraud another, cause or procure to be counterfeited, or willingly aid or assist in counterfeiting an order, for money or goods. 2. With intent to defraud another, issue, publish, or pass a counterfeit order for money or goods, if the person knows it was counterfeited. Or, 3. Knowingly and fraudulently obtain money or goods, by means of a counterfeit order for money or goods. Penalty. C. A person who violates this section is guilty of a felony, and on conviction is subject to imprisonment for not less than 2 years, and not exceeding 10 years.
In late 2013, Mr. Stengel sends out mailings, advising people and organizations they are in fact being victimized by this psychotic group of evil villains. Alison Meister Friedman was one of many who were included in a list provided to the state of Maryland, which consisted of over 140 names, organizations, businesses, etc. Even from other countries. The list was used to falsely incarcerate Mr. Stengel for providing victims evidence. They and their names were being used to the detriment of children for profits. These mailings also went to many politicians, police, the FBI, even the state's attorney of Maryland himself, Scott D. Schellenberger, who obviously wasn't concerned. However, Miss Siliski, who received nothing, yet her criminal filing is accepted by Mr. Scott D. Schellenberger, who then authorized a bench warrant to have Mr. Stengel picked up like a criminal, handcuffed, and taken to jail with $1.5 million bail. 8 days later, was released on house arrest and $0 bail to off house arrest and $500 bail. Mr. Karseski sent the state a 148-page package containing but a sampling of Miss Siliski's serious crimes. Crimes over several years, some involving others. Each one contained evidence backing up each provided criminal act. The state of Maryland dropped the case, while forwarding evidence of brainwashing via self-alienation letters. There is a 15-minute presentation that goes through all 3 lists provided to the state of Maryland and this corrupt Scott D. Schellenberger. There is zero doubt the state of Maryland is forwarding evidence its own citizens are being brainwashed to a level where they operate against their own best interests. The state of Maryland not only refuses to hold any of these criminals accountable, but instead forwards the known abuses to those already victimized and the fresh prey, aka the unsuspecting public and children, as future victims. We know how much Scott D. Schellenberger steals each week from the taxpayers via his paycheck to protect the public. How much, or what is he receiving in return for protecting the criminals while feeding them more victims? What will Alison Meister Friedman do now? Will she continue to do as told? Exactly as told? Word for word, as told? No way. These and others, provided through the state of Maryland. Some had their minor children signed their own page. Each page is clearly evidence of the results of serious brainwashing.
January 7, 2015. Dear Mr. Stengel, the purpose of my writing is to inform you to immediately cease and desist from all communication with me of any kind. By communication, I mean not only written, email, text and phone, but communication through third parties and social media. Your failure to comply with this basic request may lead to a request for a civil peace order against you, and/or the filing of criminal harassment charges. Thank you for your cooperation. January 7, 2015. Dear Mr. Stengel, the purpose of my writing is to inform you to immediately cease and desist from all communication with me of any kind. By communication, I mean not only written, email, text and phone, but communication through third parties and social media. Your failure to comply with this basic request may lead to a request for a civil peace order against you, and/or the filing of criminal harassment charges. Thank you for your cooperation.
Even an appellate judge, Raymond Teamney, a family friend of Miss Silisky, who parades Judge Teamney's name throughout the courts, like an authorization pass to commit atrocities on children, families, schools, police, and society. One of the mailings, also sent to Judge Teamney, contained evidence of many of those very actions by Miss Silisky. What was appellate judge Raymond Teamney's response to his name being used, which is against the judicial rules of ethics? Surely, an appellate court judge of Maryland would not, in cult-like fashion, send the same threats, even worded identically, would he?
January 7, 2015. Dear Mr. Stengel, the purpose of my writing is to inform you to immediately cease and desist from all communication with me of any kind. By communication, I mean not only written, email, text and phone, but communication through third parties and social media. Your failure to comply with this basic request may lead to a request for a civil peace order against you, and/or the filing of criminal harassment charges. Thank you for your cooperation.
There are over 90 of these. All but 2 are identical. The 2 odd ones out. 1, Rabbi Fink. 2, Christopher Post, as already seen. Self-alienation. What would it take for you to give up your own First Amendment rights to receive information? Well, Mr. Stengel posed that very question to Judge this Kathleen G. Cox. But first, a little history. Judge this Judith Cienza was warned by the Commission on Judicial Disabilities relating to Mr. Stengel's cases. Judith Cienza, after an insane amount of illegal actions, was recused from Mr. Stengel's cases. However, Judge this Kathleen G. Cox took over where the warned and psychotic Ensa left off. After Mr. Bradford G. Carney, Miss Silisky, and the rest of the psychotic crime ring filed yet another fraudulent gag order, fraude, Mr. Stengel was advised of the court date to defend this frauder. First Amendment rights hearing, advised by, sit down for this one, Judge this Kathleen Cox's chambers, called Mr. Stengel, and left a voicemail. Because that's normal, right? No. Now, having trapped them all, 1,000 ways from all directions, with his meticulously documenting their criminal activity over the years, Mr. Stengel knew it was going to be a waste of time. He knew he was being invited to a lynching, if you will. A joke, at best. However, he went, prepared to document, exactly what he documented. In that, they were fully aware, what they were doing to his children, other children, schools, and the unsuspecting public, and forbidding Mr. Stengel inform the victims, they are in fact victims. So, Mr. Stengel made it very clear, Judge this Kathleen G. Cox, was fully aware of her own evil actions, forcing abuses and psychological warfare tactics on children, schools, and the public, for years. And demanding by way of her own signed, 100% illegal gag order, fraud, Mr. Stengel not advised the victims they were in fact brainwashed to remove their own First Amendment rights to be informed. Although there is a more extensive presentation of this very disturbing facts, as a teaser for this presentation, we will provide this. Mr. Stengel posed that very question to Judge this Kathleen Cox, basically turning the tables back at this evil villain. Let's listen.
It's about how people were manipulated and conned against myself and my children. Okay? And to this day, they still don't know. So these people want to leave these people, and there are hundreds of them, in a state of delusion. That's their attempt, to leave them in a state. Don't let the victims know, by the way, that they've been victimized by these people. And we're going to sign an order that you can't tell the victims that they're victims. Okay? And instead, we're going to brainwash them, and we're going to make them deluded, where they send me a letter threatening me criminal prosecution should I contact them. Now, I have one question for Your Honor. What would it take for you to sign anything to give away your own First Amendment right to receive information?
But it's okay for men and women, even 18-year-old kids, to give their life and limbs to protect.
Not our problem. Screw the veterans.
Translated, it's okay for Mr. Stengel's children, you, your children, schools, teachers, police, the unsuspecting public, and the list appears to be never-ending, but not good for these thugs. Obviously, Mr. Stengel was never properly served or notified, and, although Judge this Kathleen G. Cox's chambers left Mr. Stengel a voicemail to come to court, like some VIP concierge service, it didn't go as they had all planned. Surely you can understand, after that, they did not even invite Mr. Stengel to multiple trials to defend his First Amendment rights. Therefore, removing Mr. Stengel's rights to be informed so that he could defend his First Amendment rights. Surely one can understand why they all want Mr. Stengel in prison. Not for his actions, rather his documenting their insane amount of criminal actions waged on children and the public. One question will be held over every victim's head. What will you tell your children? We can start with Alison Meister Friedman. What will she tell her children? In fact, what will Alison Meister Friedman say to Mr. Stengel's children? They already know two things. 1. Their mother is evil, violent, pathological, and an unconscionable. 2. Alison Meister Friedman assisted in the destruction of their childhoods. Everyone eagerly awaits her actions. Although eyes and ears will be on all of the victims, there will be special attention given to Mr. Christopher Post, headmaster at Boyce Latin School of Maryland. What will Mr. Post tell his teachers, staff, and specifically, all the students? Or will Mr. Post try to protect himself, as he was hoodwinked, conned, and played like a fool, by lawyering up, even using the school's money, to do so? Will he take the entire school down with him? Maybe Mr. Post would first like to confer with his esteemed alumni, Mr. Bradford G. Y. Carney, or the corrupt state's attorney, Scott D. Schellenberger. What life lesson will this headmaster provide, by example? Mr. Christopher Post should know in advance. The rules now are very simple. 1 strike, and you're out. Dear Alison Meister Friedman, is it possible Mr. Stengel has been trying to free you and the others from the grips of evil and psychotic people? Is it possible Mr. Stengel's evidence, as seen in this sampling, is so devastating to these evil and psychotic people, they are willing to, and quite frankly, forced to, do anything? Is it possible the level of evil and psychosis is such that their actions, and or the results of their actions, are unimaginable? Is it possible you will remain in a deluded state of what you call the middle? No, not an option anymore, sorry. However, is it possible, with only 2 teams, you will again choose the same team? Alex, Maya, their entire bloodline, your children, and all those that think they know you, want to know. Mr. Stengel was never properly served to defend his First Amendment rights and the rights of others to be informed. This also made apparent, given the question Judge Kathleen G. Cox asked Mr. Stengel on that very day.
How is it that you knew to be present here today? How is it that you knew to be present here today?
There was a phone call that I was laying in bed and the phone rang. I saw a call from a phone number that seemed like in the courthouse. And so my son had contacted your chambers, and your chambers told me to come.
Well, I would have been during any call that would have come from my office would have been during business hours on Friday.
I'm sorry, it was Friday. My mistake, it was Friday. That's correct.
All right. In any event, we've now taken basically a 25 minute. How is it that you knew to be present here today? All right. In any event.
In any event, really. First Amendment rights are apparently just any event. Similar to Mr. Leon W. Berg's whatever statement.
The mother misinforming the police about how it got there, whatever.
How is it that you knew to be present here today? All right. In any event.
Note, Judge Cox's chambers calls Mr. Stengel to advise of court date on Monday. Really? Because, is that what judges do? Mr. Carney said his office also called Mr. Stengel. Why? Evidence that Mr. Stengel was never properly served. And they all knew it. Besides the obvious, what other payoffs were obtained by illegally removing Mr. Stengel's First Amendment rights to inform the public regarding these criminals? First, by not properly serving Mr. Stengel, then refusing to invite Mr. Stengel to defend those very rights. Well, just months later, Kathleen G. Cox was the first judge's name on the voting ballot for re-election, and the unsuspecting public, whose rights, just months earlier, to be informed were removed by Judge Kathleen G. Cox, therefore paving the way for this evil villain to be re-elected. Guess who was re-elected? Correct? The extremely high-level unconscionable Judge Kathleen G. Cox. Elected by fraud. Elected by fraud. Elected by fraud. Elected by fraud. Dear Carol A. Crawford, Executive Director, can you explain how anybody who does not possess a conscience can possibly become a judge? Is the ability to actually feel for others, otherwise known as humanity, not required? How can anyone bring their own experiences to the bench in making decisions for others when the most important experiences in life do not and never did exist? Carol, can you explain this to the insane number of victims? Elected by fraud.
How much is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth? Is just one memory worth? How much is just one missed memory worth?
Can't wait till you end up in prison.
Witnesses. 1. Alexander Stengel. 2. Maya Stengel.
Day December 18th. The day I finally broke out of prison. It's August 26th at 9 a.m. and if anyone hears this, I just want to stay with my dad. By that I mean like full custody with my dad.
Insert disc number 4. Go on.